2019 UAC.
Just sit by you once in a while.
No, the advisory to utility. What was last night?
What's that? I hope not. I hope we're all going to work together and get the best things done for Bel Aire we can. We may disagree on how to get there.
Well, that is the bug, isn't it?
Yep.
I've heard from people that have done things before. They're still finding.
Yeah, well, some of those things never stop. Streets always need repaired. Sewers always need cleaned.
No, it's not.
What's that?
At least
She wasn't in the original. This one?
Yeah, I thought I saw
I
it in
didn't
there.
see it in mine.
I didn't see mine
And
either.
it's just a copy straight out of the budget.
Yep, it was in.
Okay. Maybe I got pretty into the paragraph and I didn't see there was
I
a
overlook
few
things
updated.
sometimes myself, so just don't be bad about it. It's like you try to bring through this stuff, you capture it.
Yeah, that's my problem. I try to read through it real fast and then promise I'm going to get back.
Well, let's see, Mr. Elshoff, you said was going to be late.
Yeah, he thought it was an hour.
So, and it is 6:31, so let's go on and get started. We have MKEC to present plans for Woodlawn and where we are on that project. So we'll let you take the floor and go
All right.
from there. Thank you.
Well, there's some new faces here. I'm Jay Engelmeyer with MKEC, and I've been working with our MKC team to design the widening and the remodernization of Woodlawn Avenue from 37th to 45th. I've been here several times talking about the project. I thought it was time again we talk about just the status of where we're at. Jason Gish is head of our landscape department, and he's going to be here too. He's had a busy day, and he was still finishing some things up. So I told him, well, I got to talk a while anyway, so he'll just walk on in here in a little bit. Basically, I was just going to give you an update of where we're at. Right now, we're working on plans. We're to a stage where the design is getting close to being done, and we're actually doing plan production. And basically, to do plans in the KDOT format, there's a lot of quantity schedules, discussion of how things are bid, and it's just a lot of charts and tables and quantities and such. And there's a lot of construction details, too, that we're working on, and that's what we're finishing up. We are getting ready to submit what's called office check plans. And office check plans are plans that are about 95% complete. The things that aren't complete are usually some of that, what I call the accounting side of the quantities and bid, and just a few other details that we'll leave to be done. My original plan was to have those office check plans in by the end of this month, March, probably a little bit behind schedule, reasons being, one, we're still talking about some landscape issues, and I'm just working with utilities, some of the private utilities, not the city water, sanitary sewer, or storm sewer, but some of those companies are, I'm working with them. I don't want to say they're dragging their feet because they're working pretty diligently now. So basically when I say the design's done, we basically have the street laid out with the grades and the profile of the roadway. We know the limits of construction, how far the road work's going to go up each of the side roads to tie in to the new pavement. If you recall, or if you haven't been here before, right today we have a raised rural section with big wide ditches. Our plan is we're going to lower the road, widen it out, and put curb and gutter on there where there's not curb and gutter today, and basically fill in the ditches that are there. And how we make the project drain is we're adding storm sewer, and there's a lot of storm sewer in this project. So that storm sewer, we know how big it is, we know where it's going. Some of the things we've been working with is where the storm sewer is going to go within the roadway so we can actually keep traffic on the road while building the storm sewer, because we have to have a pretty big hole. Storm sewer is a big significant portion of the project. It's probably a good, at least over $2 million of the total price. But what's going to result is not only a new street, but a new system that drains well. And besides just putting in a lot of storm sewer conduit to carry the water, there's a lot of storm sewer inlets that are going to be along Woodlawn and along side roads to catch that water, so we're not driving through big puddles of the gutter. Like, anywhere in Wichita, there's just a lot of places where the roads are flat and there's not very many inlets or storm sewer, and everybody's driving in this middle of the road because the water's in there. And there will be very intense storms, short duration storms that'll cause that, but essentially what we have is a 10-year design storm. And what that means is there's really, the way to explain it, you've all heard of a 100-year storm when we have a flood. This is a storm that the odds are happening of 10% chance once a year of having a storm this intense. Or, as we say, it's a storm we're going to have once every 10 years. And we're not talking about, in the storm sewer design, we're not talking about a big, huge flood. We're talking about where it rains really intense in the drainage basin of this project, which could be a very short duration storm. A lot of times, when we start design, we ask ourselves, what's our design criteria? Working with Ann, we decided a 10-year storm is where we're going, rather than a 5-year storm, which is sometimes a lot used on a commercial arterial. With the 10-year, we're getting a better system, more or less. And we even looked at prices of a 5-year system versus a 10, and the cost difference wasn't that much. But just knowing how full the ditches get today, we just wanted that little extra insurance redundancy in the system so it drains better. One problem we ran into in the design is south of the railroad tracks. Actually, just on the south end of the project, the existing storm sewer ties into the city of Wichita's storm sewer system. Those systems are not designed for a 10-year storm. They're designed for a 5-year storm, which raised some concerns, but we've evaluated how those are going to behave. We don't want a 10-year storm to hit and then all of a sudden the water can't get away. Once the water today, the big ditch is pretty much in on the very south end of the project, and they get into that existing storm sewer system today that dumps into the city of Wichita system. Looking at exceeding a 5-year storm, that water will back up into the storm system, and it'll actually come out of the inlets and then just surface run. We're actually, by lowering the road, we're putting in a sump there, I'm going to say in front of the Sonic, and that was a concern that we'd actually have a sump and a big hole there. We have analyzed that, and we won't have a problem because of the way the city system is. They have inlets along 37th Street. And as a result, water, when the storm pipes get full, when their system is exceeded, it'll actually run out the inlets, and it'll run out those inlets on the downstream of where our project is, and we should never see a big problem on Woodlawn itself. So we wanted to evaluate that, and we'll document that and put it in a file so Ann always has it on record. But that was a concern that I'm glad we're over.
You talked about a 10-year and this system's $2 million. So what would happen if we went a 50-year, $100 million? What does that do for the cost?
That's pretty unreasonable because it'll raise it. I would say to go to a 50-year, you're going to over double the costs of the storm sewer, which is going to add another $2 million to a $6 to $7 million project. 10-year,
pipe.
Yeah. And because what you have to do is not only do your pipes get bigger to carry the water, now we're also talking about getting water off the streets more often, more frequently to capture that big, huge storm. And so the costs, they're not linear. In other words, if you went from a 5-year to a 10-year, it's not going to be double the price, but you start going up to a 50-year and there's a curve there and it just gets unreasonable. 10 years not unreasonable.
You said something about Sonic, and I know Sonic always floods currently, and so does the former gas station there at the corner, always flooded. But where is that? Which city, pipe start? Is it at 37th or is
it's actually
north of 37th?
It's actually in 37th Street. It crosses 37th, and the 37th Street project. There's some inlets that are there, and so it picks up water west of the intersection and carries it east of the intersection down to a bridge, just a quarter mile or a third of a mile to the east. I Kemp. That
Oh, to the,
Yeah.
to that stream down there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you really get around that corner, and there's quite a bit of fall on 37th Street, so the water gets away. It's just a matter of making sure it gets over the curb, over the hump, and then go around the corner. So I have talked to the city of Wichita about upsizing their pipe, and they, of course, their standard answer was, we don't have the money for it now, but thanks for letting us know. We have pipe that's not sized appropriately. I think some of that problem, even if we were just designing for the 5-year storm, there would still be some concern about some of the size of that pipe. And I don't know what the criteria was when it was put in.
That pipe is under 37th. It's not in this project.
No, I am not replacing that pipe. It is the city of Wichita's pipe, and I am not going to replace it. We will be replacing, there's an inlet on the northwest corner of that intersection it's on 37th. There, I plan on, even though that's a city of Wichita inlet, we are bringing in a brand new storm pipe into it, bringing it in at an angle, and it needs to be a wider or a longer inlet to receive the pipe, so we have to do that. And the city's okay with that. Putting a bigger inlet in there at that corner just means when that does get full, due to a storm that exceeds their stormwater capacity, it'll come out that inlet even better. So we're getting a little more redundancy out there at that event as well.
So when the storm sewer backs up, the water's going to come up onto the road, and where will that happen? Will that happen at the 37th and Woodlawn intersection?
Yes, or to the east of there, actually.
Or to the
Out of
east.
that inlet mainly, and then there's a few other inlets downstream that it'll come up there too. And we can show that in a line, in a model showing the hydraulic, what they call the hydraulic grade line, in relation to the pipe itself, just to outline so we know exactly where that is.
And if we did the 5-year system that was compatible with the city of Wichita pipe, the water would...
I'm still thinking there would have been some problem, not to the near the degree. I don't think that the city of Wichita system is designed even for a 5-year. I think it's odd the way it is, because some of the pipes seems to be adequate even for a 10-year, but some of it I don't think is adequate for a 5-year. How it was put in or what their thinking was, I'm not sure.
But if it were to back up in the 5-year system, it would then just run down Woodlawn to that intersection anyway?
It would mostly run out of 37th Street, and you would never even notice it on Woodlawn.
Okay.
But if it does ever get up in Woodlawn, it will run around the corner, and it's not going to run over driveways and onto private property. You talked about the Sonic Drive, or the old gas station drive.
Right.
It's just actually the driveway slopes back, and there's actually a sump in that area. The way, by getting rid of the rural roads and coming in with curb and gutter, that driveway is going to drain towards the street now. So that duck pond's going away.
So,
And then-
but the water really will go east. It'll go
Yes.
towards the, I don't know, what is the business over there?
The creek, yeah.
The creek, yeah.
Sure.
The Taco Bell in that direction.
Yes, it will. So it'll become the city of Wichita's problem.
Okay.
So that's really, with the storm design, basically, like I said, we're done with that design too, and all that will be, is ready for, there's a lot of details we have to put on the plans to do that. I think we've talked about other items. We talked about, we've got new traffic signals that we're finishing details on. What we have learned is on the water, the city's water and their sanitary sewer, we have to replace the pipes under the railroad track because the sanitary sewer is very corroded and there's not very good flow in there. And then there's just some water upgrades that need to happen with the project. Those we can pull out separately in a separate set of plans and actually bid those before the street project goes. And that's what we're looking at doing now.
What's the railroad's involvement in that? I mean, I know they'll say it's your problem, but they're going to be interested in it, right?
Correct. In fact, they won't say it's your problem. They're going to say it's our problem, but you've got to fix it.
Okay.
And I'm working with the Union Pacific Railroad now about that. In conversations with various folks with the UP, they keep saying, well, we fixed that crossing. We fixed the gates. The big deal is where the gate positions are located. And they look like they were placed exactly where they were, thinking about a future 3-lane road in there. Basically, we have a 2-lane road with wide shoulders. Our new pavement's going to be at that location almost the exact same width. So there should be, so as far as getting And that's where you have the biggest problems and even the biggest costs if the railroad has to upgrade, because those signals will, and I think we've talked about this, are going to cost somewhere in the $750,000 range, and it takes time and such. We shouldn't have to deal with any of that. We still, by replacing the water line under the track and replacing the sanitary sewer, there's still some permitting we have to do. The railroad will want an agreement with the city, I believe, from talking, I don't know if I've touched base with you, but on the 37th Street project, I've been told that the Union Pacific agreement is with Bel Aire. So,
I believe so, yes.
okay. So I don't know if, I'm not sure if you were around when that happened, if you remember.
It was, as I was just coming to the city, so.
Okay, I don't know if there was any big concern there. I don't know if there was even utility crossings, but there will be some permitting we have to do. And that agreement will more or less say it's going to lay out what the city's responsible for and what the Union Pacific's not responsible for, more or less. We are bringing the bike path, the 10-foot bike path on the west side and the 5-foot bike path on the east side across the railroad tracks. We don't have to, we can match the railroad grade easy there. That shouldn't be a big concern. The crossing material will have to be added to provide a smooth crossing at the, for the bikers and pedestrians at those locations. The railroad's going to make the city pay for that cost. I've been budgeting for that cost and all of the estimates, and at this point I haven't learned that number is not any good, so I think we're still good there. So that's the railroad coordination status. Some other, just with private utilities, I've been working with them. They have to move, since they're using the public right-of-way, it is their responsibility to move out of the way from our construction. For them to move out of the way, I have to give them plans, and that's the catch-22. I have to give them plans that are developed far enough along to where they don't move, and then I change something in the design and come back later and they say, no, we moved once, we're not moving again. So we're to that point where I've given them plans. Some of them are actually to the point where they've done their relocation design and they're going to start fairly soon. I don't have any dates yet. So what happens, or what I've learned on these projects, is the utilities will come out and start to move their utilities, and then the phone rings that, are we starting the job already? Are we starting the widening? Well, yes and no. We're not starting, the utilities are starting, but with some of those utilities, Westar, Evergy, they're mostly above ground, and I'm trying to work with them to minimize their relocations. AT&T and Kansas Gas Service are probably the major players as far as having to get in, dig holes, and they're going to have potholes and maybe even partial lane closures and such before our job even starts. So there's always that issue of, well, we're tired of construction already, and we haven't even started yet. But I'm still working with them as far as what their schedules are going to be. I do know AT&T says we have a design, we're hiring a contractor, so I will keep everyone informed as far as what their schedule is, just so everybody has an idea of what's going on.
Are they moving far enough that when we finally get to a 4-lane, they won't have to move again?
Yes.
Good.
Even
They-
the 5-lane.
And they are what they, sometimes the utilities are in odd places and you wonder why they installed their line where they did. Working with them in the last 10 years, they know I'm going to move as far out of the right-of-way as I can. In a perfect world, they'll even get their own easement off of private property, and then that way, if they are asked to move again, they're in their easement, and they'll tell us, now this time it's at your cost, but that should not ever be a problem in this corridor. Speaking of private utilities with an easement, we have Southern Star, that we have a crossing there at 45th Street. We have worked with them. I was a little worried about what they would require. Since we're getting rid of open ditches and putting storm sewer conduits, of avoiding their line, avoiding a high-pressure gas line is not just brushing beside it, but they want certain distances away. We're meeting all of their requirements, and they have given us approval on what our design is. So that, we've had to move a little storm sewer out of the way to do it, but I was even worried about them wanting concrete slabs between their line and our new pavement, and they're not asking for that. So that's good news. We have the Coffeyville Resources crude line that's down there further in the park. I'm still working with them. Our storm sewer can cross below their line without a conflict, but I'm still working with them to find out what kind of clearances, and if we're going to be installing a large storm box, we're going to have their line exposed, and issues with making sure we support their line adequately during construction is a concern I have. So we've still got some details with that, but at least I know we can cross it with our storm sewer without having them move their line.
Is that high pressure?
The crude line I don't believe is high pressure. If it was, I'm sure they would be telling me what I need to do.
The gas line is?
Yeah,
the crude line is?
yeah,
Okay.
Southern Star, basically, they have their own design manuals. They have requirements. I submitted the plan. They told me it was no good. We revised it. So Coffeyville Resources isn't quite that, I'm going to say, concerned about this project. But I think we're over the hump as far as I know we could pass our storm line below their gas line adequately. Well, I say adequately with what I would call normal clearances. I'm hoping they agree, but that's something we've got to get to the bottom of. The other issue, and I know we've talked about this some, is traffic control during construction. And as we build the road, getting people on the road's an issue, and that's something we're still working on details. I think what I've told you in the past, and we're still working the same plan, is we will keep the road open. We're not going to just close down sections of the road completely. Because the existing road is 2-lane, and because we're putting in a deep storm sewer, it's going to be hard to maintain a lane of traffic in each direction once we're north of the railroad tracks. So what we plan to do is just have one lane of traffic for northbound, and there's a reason why northbound. So everyone has access. It's just I can only go northbound. So if I'm pulling out of my neighborhood and I usually go south, now I have to pull north and find another way to go around. We chose northbound over southbound because south of the railroad tracks we have a wider pavement and we should be able to keep a lane of traffic in each direction. Well, as someone's going north, I don't want to have a roadblock that they can't, because if we had a southbound north of the tracks, it would be very hard for people would have to turn around there. So that way anyone coming up Woodlawn south of the tracks will always have a way out by going northbound. I think that, when we start the construction and start putting the storm sewer in, that's when we're looking at the one lane of traffic. Once we get part of the new road built, we might be able to have enough room to allow in the next phase where we flip to the other side of the road construction that we would have enough room for a lane in each direction. Some of that is in KDOT. That's one of the things they will review my traffic control plans. And it's not out of their power to say that's not good enough or let's try this or something. So
is the storm sewer on the west side of the road bed?
it's on the east side of the
It's
road.
on the east side of the road.
We had it down the center and realized that you can't build it there.
Right.
I liked it down the center, so all your manhole lids, if you need to access, are in the center turn lane. But we're going to have to put it on the west side just to give enough room, or on the east side. Sorry. We have to do that just for constructability purposes. But storm sewer, especially with the box we're putting in, should be a very low maintenance item. I would say, as far as the structure itself, won't ever see it deteriorate because it is concrete. We're not using metal pipe or flimsy pipe.
In your phasing of the project, when would the storm sewer phase start? Would that be?
That would be probably in the first phase.
So that would,
very early on.
You think that might be this year, or is that going to be next year?
Let's talk schedule. Since we're pulling the water and the sanitary sewer out in a separate set of plans, our original plan was to bid that later this year and have that construction work go on in the fall and get it out of the way. And the road, there's road closures or lane closures or some traffic control that's going to happen to build the water and the sanitary sewer. Mm-hmm. It'll be minor compared to the road work. But it would be nice to get the water and sanitary sewer out of the way and then come this time next year, late February next year, to start the road project in earnest, where the big road closures and big traffic control comes in. And then that would take pretty much the full 2021. At this point, that's still my plan to do that, bid it that way. KDOT's schedule is written around that. The railroad could hold things up, but I don't see that being a slowdown. But getting the private utilities out of the way in a timely manner so we're not tripping over them is the other concern I have. But I'm working with the utilities now, and hopefully we're still going to stay on that schedule.
So just a quick question about the railroad, because they shut down 45th and Hillside for a long time. It was months they shut them down. I know they were putting new crossing grades and all that stuff, and we're not asking them to do that here. But the portion that they are involved with of this, would that shut down the traffic at all? Or would that just be an inconvenience if they took that long like they did at 45th and Hillside?
What the trick is with railroad, we're talking about building a road and keeping one lane open. If we build the west side of the road, we can move the traffic to the east side of the road and vice versa. The railroad, since they have gates, don't want to see you move northbound traffic into the other sets of lanes. So you have to keep the traffic there in that lane or protected by the gate. Well, we have a lane of traffic in each direction, and we also have a pretty wide shoulder. So the plan is we can keep one lane open here. I mean, even at the railroad crossing, and that's where the sanitary sewer is going. It has to cross there, so we have to have a bore pit. So there may be a time during the sanitary sewer installation where we just have to go to that one lane northbound, and it stays in that east lane. Then when that's done, you still have to do that crossing in chunks. The other option is and that's what the railroad would prefer, is just to close the whole street down and build the railroad and build the pavement up against the railroad. That's not an option. I don't see that as an option here. So, and I've been working with the UP on several other projects recently where they understand that and they'll allow what we're doing, but they won't let that northbound traffic move over to the other lanes. So that's what complicates it. The other piece that complicates it, the railroad, if they do see an opportunity, we're going to replace our crossing material, just the crossing on the road. They'll come in and do that on their schedule. So if we're going to replace it, there's a time when they'll come in and they may want to shut down the road completely. I don't know. It doesn't take long to do those, but at this point, I don't have any indication of when they would want to do that, or even if they would want to do that. Because right now we're planning on just matching up to the railroad at the exact same elevation, and nothing has to happen to the tracks.
Which is just talking about, if they do that, it would be just replacing tracks, not doing anything with the crossings or anything like that.
Correct. And not even replacing the tracks, just replacing the crossing material. I don't remember. It's not a concrete crossing there today, is it? It is?
Yeah.
So they may, if it's there, they may not want to. That's what I don't know yet from them. So.
Okay.
Really, one of the other issues that's still out there that we have some more work to do, some more to discussing, is some of the aesthetic enhancements we're going to do, and that's what Jason's going to help talk to us about. And I'm not trying to push us onto that phase yet. I think he wants to show some drawings, but that's something else really we need to nail down, and one of the other remaining things we have to figure out before we get final plans done. So. I think I've hit the issues I wanted to hit, but I know there's probably lots of questions, and I can certainly answer any.
Just to make sure I understand, you're saying that things are going to start in the fall with drainage and piping and whatnot, but that shouldn't be too big of a headache. People might be annoyed, but we're not going to go to one lane for the most part. Maybe a little bit, but not for the most part. And then the real big headache, and when you start doing all the pavement, really starts a year from then. Is that pretty much?
Not a year from then, a year from now.
A year from now.
And I do want to clarify, the utility work would be sanitary sewer and water line. Storm sewer would all be done with the street work. The sanitary sewer, all we're replacing a section of pipe that's under the railroad because it's very corroded and it's backing sewage up. So that'll be nice to get that fixed, and we'll put it in a casing pipe so where it can be pulled out in the future if need be, hopefully years and years from now. And then there's just some water line. Well, some water line has to move out of the way of some of our storm sewer, but other water line is just needs to be enhanced. And there's just old, out-of-date lines. And we're taking the opportunity of putting that in. A lot of that water line's off the road. So, yeah, the construction materials will have to get in there, and they'll have equipment. They'll want to park on the shoulder, and they may push traffic over to the side. I don't know if in the water section if there's a portion where they're going to have to actually close a lane. With the sanitary sewer under the railroad tracks, we're going to have to shut it down to one lane for a period. And it shouldn't be long. They'll dig a bore pit on both sides of the tracks, and they'll push a steel casing pipe through there, and then after that, they can just push in the sanitary sewer pipe, and they have a nice crossing at that. But to get it to work while leaving the existing sanitary flowing, we have to move out into a lane of traffic to do it.
Any other questions for Mr. J? Guess it's your turn.
All right, well, I'm just the icing on the cake guy. So, we brought along a drawing because I thought that might be easiest to, maybe it's easier for me, but I can explain to you kind of what some of the ideas are. Just backing up, when we had kind of our public input meeting, just wanted to, some of the things that I remember being seemed like the citizens were excited about was just one, trying to really do as good a job as we can with the aesthetics. Obviously, we have a budget, and that's going to dictate a lot of it. But so we've tried to do a plan that's not over the top, I would say, but it's very nice, and it tries to address what, from my vantage point, would be some of the, less aesthetic issues we had, particularly down on the south and west side of our project, kind of in our industrial business area there. We have parking lots and such that, right now they may not have curb. Some of them have curb, and so Jay's worked really hard with Ann, and they've kind of worked out how to get the sidewalk in there and make this look as seamless as possible. And then one thing that I wanted to show you as an example is you have an opportunity where you could go in and do some screening with shrub, something like that, just to, if you recall when they did the little project with the new parking lot, it's just kind of in the middle of that area there. They kind of went in and landscaped that all, and boy, that just really made that look a lot better than what it did originally. So those are just some ideas for your consideration. The other thing is I've brought kind of a recommendation on types of plant materials as far as the trees and things of that nature. We no longer have the median in the street that we kind of had as an option, and the reason for that is because the fire department requires 20-foot through lanes in each direction, and we can't get 20-foot through lanes on the north of the tracks in a 3-lane section. So the only places where you're going to see median is where we're trying to protect the pedestrian crossing across at the park, Bel Aire Park. And then the other location is the railroad requires kind of a short little median section, much like what you've seen over here on 45th, where you can basically keep people from trying to go through the guards when they're down. So with that, if it's okay, I'd like to invite you to the table. I know it's going to be tight, but I could just kind of give you a good idea of kind of the constraints that we're dealing with. I've got some lines on there, just red dashed line on either side of the portion of the street north of the railroad, so you can see where the future curve would be, where it would land. And then we're trying to kind of make this to where it would work long term. I want to be upfront with you. The challenge of that is if you've got 10 or 12 extra feet of green space up there today, you are going to have roots grow into that. Now, there's things that we would do, how many ever years from now, 10, 20, 30 years, that you could try to do to minimize the impact of those trees, because by that point, everybody's going to probably be pretty proud of the trees along there. But we're doing our best to try to accommodate that reality if and when the road goes to 5 lane up there. So if you don't mind, we'll just kind of gather around here and I'll kind of walk you through a couple pieces. And, first thing I'll kind of show you, this is kind of the plant palette that we were recommending. So on the deciduous trees, many of these are either, what do you want to call a native tree in Kansas? I mean, how long ago before it stopped burning down? Did we get trees? It's been that's right, just on the rivers. So some of the trees, we don't have cottonwoods only because they're kind of tough on sidewalks. So you may or may not be familiar with these, but basically more hardy type trees. So there's a lot of oaks on here. Bur oak's a native. Shumard is a native, but it's a red oak, and they're very durable. Probably one of the most widely planted oaks here today. Sawtooth. When we have some wetter areas, there's the neighborhood that's actually in Wichita. What's that neighborhood called? I always forget. Anyhow,
It was his knees, though, right?
Yeah, but that we don't have. There's basically the way that it works along there is there's a low area and there's you can plant a lot of the trees. The trees that they have there today struggle. They have some Bradford pears. I will not plant a Bradford pear on their project. I hope you don't like it. This is a hybrid American elm. There's a few different varieties. This here is kind of a cool tree. It's a Zelkova. It's kind of like an elm. But this particular one, you can see this kind of squashed growth habit. And obviously on the west side of our project, we have that large overhead transmission line of Evergreens. And so this tree is actually perfect for that because it stays. That's right. It's more, it's kind of got this different growth habit. This is another tree you may or may not be familiar with. It likes water too, so I know we've placed it. We're kind of in that lower floodplain area. Swamp white oak, it's very much like a bur oak. It does like in there water and more nitrogen, but all very long-lived, durable trees. On the ornamental side, the ones that are going to have more color or flowers, I would say, or fruit, I'm kind of showing like whitebud, Tartarian maple. You may be familiar with Amur maple, but Tartarian is 5 times tougher. Maybe not 5 times, but it's very tough. It's a very nice tree, stays compact, doesn't have wind tatter problems. Shantung maple, there's actually, it's a very durable tree, pretty ornamental. And then crab apples, you're probably familiar with crab apples.
Question about this one?
Yes,
I have the beans.
it does have beans.
Yes, they do.
Yes.
But I thought they had bred somehow that they were not.
I'm not familiar if they have or have not. That is kind of annoying, but they are. I always suggest them because it is, you can find them on the rivers here. They kind of look tropical. They're kind of cool. But the beans, some people are annoyed by the beans, but they basically in the fall, they have this long. What's that?
And we'll be annoyed by the beans.
But there's, I could tell you, I have other plans, but I just kind of have this graphic one here. And then as far as our evergreen trees, we stayed away from any kind of pine. The only pine that really does well and doesn't eventually die in our area right now that I'm familiar with would be like a pinyon pine. But, and that's an option for you all. They hate irrigation, so it'd be perfect for this job when we don't have any. But we're showing more of a Canard juniper, which is eastern red cedar, just a variety of it, and then the Taylor juniper, which become quite popular in the last 10 years. You'll see them a lot. They're just kind of very vertical, and I'll show you kind of where we're thinking there might be a use for those. And then if we do have opportunity, and this is showing a variety of more perennial or grass and perennial, I think we mainly stick with grasses where we have opportunities. Like in these short medians that we do have, I think it would be really nice gesture to have plantings in there, and we have plenty of things that are native that would do just fine in those medians. So with that, if I can start, I've drawn some areas. Mr. Lasher and the students have talked to me about some ideas that they have for starting. We'll start at the south and then might fall off. So here's 37th Street, and just to back up real quick. Yeah, thank you. Back up real quick. What Jay was talking about, this is the inlet that the water will boil out of first. And then here's where it would boil out of second. So it's just that little short stretch.
This 37th.
Yes.
Okay,
So that's going east there.
all right.
So here's where the Sonic is, and we're kind of getting into their median in there, but we're trying to basically get some larger street trees on this side of the street to line it with a mix of ornamentals. You can see here the walk works out pretty nice to have pushed clear over towards the right-of-way. And then we have a right-of-way change, and this is the neighborhood where I mentioned they have the pears, and I think they have some ash trees.
There's some little one there right now, yeah.
Yes, and so, to try to be a good neighbor to them, we're kind of trying to put quite a bit back, but this is where my recollection is we're kind of showing either the catalpa or the cypress, because they'll grow well, they grow fast. The cypress obviously do have knees. I would say that we have some ideas long term. If that were if it were allowable for it to be more of a sedge or a grass like that you don't mow so often, those kind of things would work well down there in that low area. They quite likely would want to try to show up anyhow. Flipping back over to kind of this industrial commercial area on the west, the bank's already got the little berm there, so we're kind of trying to work around that. And then here's where we start with all the little individual parking lots and the different businesses. And so what we were suggesting is we've left a little gap in here because these are kind of at different grades. It gives us a little bit of flexibility. But there would be an opportunity for beautification in front of these businesses. I believe this is one that already has the boxwoods and stuff around it. But this would be an opportunity where you could install a shrub if you were trying to just soften that edge. And you can see we don't have any room in this particular area for any trees. There's simply not enough gap between our curb and our sidewalk where we recommend anything. And then you can see here we start this dash line. This indicates where the street widening, what it would look like in the future. And so you can see the tree placement, we're trying to fit them so they would still be behind.
So this is the theoretical 5 lane?
Yes.
Dotted line here?
Yes, yep, theoretical 5 lane. So it starts to transition here before the tracks and transitions right here on the southbound. But now when we get into here, now we're fully Bel Aire both sides, and we have the nice gesture with the sign down here. But there's an opportunity, as we see it, where we could do something at our bridge crossing on the culvert. It looks like a culvert, but you can kind of celebrate that and make that kind of a threshold that makes a statement. And I just threw a quick little sketch on here of what that might look like. It kind of looked the same from either side, but this is looking as if you're looking at it from over here by the pond. But if you're on the road, it would look, you just flip it around to the other side. There's an opportunity where you can do some enhancements. We've done some of these in the city and elsewhere where you might have some columns. There might be a little bit of a change in the sidewalk pavement just to kind of really make a focal point of that. You could have some lighting.
Red banner there.
That's right, these light poles could have banners. I should have drawn a street view so you can kind of see what that would look like. And we've actually talked about that as, right now you have all the, we use the electrical poles to go hang flags and stuff on.
Right.
What we talked about is, as an example, the city of Mays, Tom mentioned they go out there, they've put in these PVC pipes, and they're every 200 feet or something, and they just line an entire Mays road up over there with these flags. Another idea would perhaps be, maybe we get into a certain location, we just kind of really load up a particular area and really just make it feel like you really celebrate one particular area. Or the other one is you just kind of spread it out the whole way. But there are some advantages, and you can kind of build a real sense of something grand happening if you picked on an area, maybe here by the park. And I didn't try to depict those on this. I'm just telling you that maybe something that's very close together could really do a lot of the same thing, and maybe it's a little bit easier to take care of because you could keep all your poles and stuff in a certain area. But that's for you to consider. I would like, so most of the walk, as you can see, it's straight. There's only curves when we got to get perpendicular crossings to the railroad or get back to cross the street or, jog around right-of-ways and parking lots. But this is where the pond is, in the Coral Ridge. And so this is an opportunity where it'd be kind of fun to have the walk feel a little bit more engaged to the water that's there, and to just make it feel more park-like, where you get a little more green in between the curb and the sidewalk. And so if you were to take a section through here, you can kind of get the idea that this being the east side, you have your 6-foot walk over here, street trees. Here's our road section. We have an opportunity for some trees that would be under the power line area. We have our big 10-foot bike lane, and then we have the park trees and stuff that are down here. We have this opportunity to really keep this nice visual relationship to the pond, and just kind of reflect that. This was something that we talked about in placemaking. This is not something that we're going to do in this budget that I'm aware of, but it's something that Ty's mentioned. What if the city had an opportunity to have some sort of signage to communicate to citizens? And so maybe there's signage or something that could be
Digital sign.
right.
Put announcements and stuff. Oh, okay. Digital sign.
And we always talked about in the concept there could be an opportunity where there's maybe an overlook, or maybe there's a shade structure, or maybe there's flags, just like what you have coming into the building here, where you have 3 flag poles, and we can celebrate that. And there might be a retaining wall or an overlook or something like that. It's just, this is not part of it. I'm just trying to kind of provide ideas to you. And then moving on, so I'll switch to the northern half. So on the northern half, so there's Perryton, pick up where we left off, and we're approaching the Bel Aire Park. And some of the ideas down there is staff wants to leave room where if we ever needed to expand the courts, we have a little bit of room to do some things like that. I do think there's an opportunity to kind of celebrate the park a little bit better and create a better sense of entry. There's not, right now you kind of walk in wherever. But if we're doing this crosswalk here, it would be kind of cool, in my opinion, if we could kind of do some landscape in here, maybe have a little bit of fun with the walkway. Here's the existing kind of walk that goes into the gut of the park. And then one thing that staff's mentioned to me that as an idea they're working on is building these big metal letters that announces the city and the park. And I may not have it 100% correct, but kind of an idea would be is we come back in here, there's water line and stuff in here, so we have to be behind that. We have to lose a few of the pine trees. But there might be an opportunity where we could set these big letters on a plinth, and I would suggest they be kind of big and blocky, that people will go up there and they stand on them or take pictures by them or whatnot. But this kind of gives you an idea of scale. So these things might be, 4 or 5 feet tall. This might be 70, 80 foot long in entirety. But that could be kind of fun. Once again, this is not in our project, but just trying to give you an idea of what you could do. And this is the thing, these things here we can do with the project, with the sidewalk. But this would have to be something else. But I'm just trying to give you an idea that, maybe you get a little bit of something behind it for some color. Maybe there's an opportunity to do a little earth burn here for a little contrast and juxtaposition. But those are And then this would be like just an ice cream lawn, so you got plenty of room to kind of back up and try to get your wide angle lens going and take a picture should you choose. And if nothing else, it's mainly just a big visual opportunity to announce the city at that park. Moving on, you can see just it's kind of very much, pretty good amount of trees through here. One, those are the smaller ones, and the shades are generally the larger ones. Moving up to the intersection, just trying to kind of, where it widens up, show more opportunity up there.
Is this a monument here?
There's an existing monument for the
Right.
summit.
Yeah. I knew there was one there. There were some concerns from some citizens that you were going to do something with that, and I told them, what I heard is no.
No, we're not touching it.
We're not touching it.
Not touching it.
We're getting close to it, but
Yeah. You don't know. Okay.
So I appreciate you standing up here to look at this. It makes it easier for me to kind of walk you through it, and I wasn't sure I could do it on the screen or anything. So, but that's the idea. As far as the budget of what I've kind of just roughed out, the trees themselves. So we have the sod is one item, but the trees were kind of in their own item. I think we had 100,000 just kind of penciled in, or was given to us at 100,000.
that's what I penciled in arbitrarily.
Right now, what I would say, everything that's shown as far as the green trees and all those plantings, not necessarily any of these extra things here, but those are, in my estimation, somewhere between 130 and 160,000 to do what I've drawn here for just the plantings. Now, I have an idea for your consideration. It's just an idea. So let me give you a little history of what happens when we do these big street projects. And Wichita, being the one who's done the most of them, bids these things out. You get the lowest bid contractor, but in the landscaping world, the lowest bid contractor is not necessarily apples to apples. You can write specs until you're blue in the face, but the city of Wichita, in my opinion, has not forced contractors to do what the specs say, and over time it's created a very poor quality. It's difficult to get a good job. I'm not saying that there aren't great jobs done by contractors that will bid on these, but I've noticed it becomes very difficult to really get what you want. And so plant materials living, it's all individuals, so a bur oak tree from this nursery is not the same as a bur oak tree necessarily from this nursery, and you really have a hard time, and they think I'm the biggest jerk in the world if I really try to hold their feet to the fire. So I'm just saying that's kind of, there's this precedent out there, and that's kind of what we deal with. We get lucky sometimes, but for your thinking, and I'm not asking you to decide now, but you do have probably one of the best quality nurseries in the entire metro area, and that's Treetop. I don't know how this works. I don't know how the funding works, but there could be a possibility where you could just go to them and say, hey, is there an opportunity where we could maybe negotiate this? And I think Mr. Matney there he would treat you very fair. I know him personally. I think he's a good man. I know they do good work. I know they have good material. It takes out of the equation. You're not going to get apples to apples with what the plans ask for. But that's just for your consideration. I don't know all the details of how it can be done. But I do think there could be some advantages to the city in doing it that way, because you're going to get a good product, you're using a local business, and you also, you could consider if it's worthwhile to try to do something for the first year of maintenance. One thing that's always difficult in landscape is somebody plants it, and then it's yours. And a lot of the contractors I'm saying in town, they'll plant it, and it's cheaper for them to let it die and go replace it the next year than it is for them to maintain it. Or maybe that's their mentality. I see a lot. Maybe you'll get a great year like we had. In the last year, you didn't even have to hardly water a tree last year for planting, even larger ones. So something to consider. But sometimes I've seen, we've done projects before where we've had a 1 or 2 year maintenance, and that's kind of a different deal. But it's kind of nice because then it's theirs, and they put it in and they can take care of it. There's no one to blame but themselves if something dies.
So a plan like this with this many trees and this many shrubs, what would we be looking at from a maintenance perspective from the city? Is this a big deal, or is this a small deal?
The first year of maintenance is definitely more intense than the later years. And really, probably the first 2 or 3 years as the plants get established, if there's a dry season, you need to go out and water that. So there is some additional maintenance involved. There's trimming of the trees later on. So there is some. The beautification aspect of it, it's kind of something for you guys to weigh as far as what's it worth as far as beautifying versus the amount of time that it takes to upkeep. And while it will add a bit of time, it's not going to add another person's worth of time. So it'll be fit in with the rest of the staff, and it'd be plug for Tree City USA. They would be very happy to see all these trees added.
Well, the other thing that I was wondering is, do we have an opportunity here to get our tree board involved to help us think a little bit about some of the trees
I think
here?
it's a great idea. I think we should let them help us make some good decisions here.
One thing.
But I'm no expert on that.
Yeah, me
Oh,
either.
it's nice to meet you.
I am the worst person in the world to ask. What I was wondering is, as we think about other roads in the city, we want everything to get matched throughout the whole city eventually. Is what we're doing here going to work well with, can we continue this? Are we doing something doesn't fit on certain types of roads, or, you know what I mean?
Sure. So what I guess when we were doing the original public input meeting, what I was trying to stress to everyone, the citizens, is it's really about creating a place. You can build a street and then run cars up and down it all day long, but if you want something that makes a difference to the citizens and what they become, what they cherish, what they consider valuable to their community, it's going to be place. And what I'm trying to say by that is it's these details of what you do that make it different or unique to Bel Aire. And so, to your point, we don't have a whole mile that has any sidewalk on it. Except for, I guess, 37th Street now, but it's really an opportunity for us to put this is our best foot forward, what we can do.
I guess maybe clarify. So someday we redo 45th Street, right? And then we turn left, and are we going to make it all flow together well with what we're doing here? I mean, I'm not going to say it's look exactly the same, but, I would feel like you wouldn't want your city to be like, oh, choppy, this all looks not tied together.
I would say that we haven't done many, I would say, hardscape type elements, or if you had some sort of light pole, or some specialty thing like that. It's pretty, I don't know if mundane's the right word, but it's pretty, there's nothing too crazy here. It's just little details of what you can do, those place-making opportunities, or what people are going to remember. And then, 10 years from now, the trees are going to actually, they're going to be a lot more mature, and the bigger they get, the more people are going to really think this is great. I mean, they're going to really, be really excited about it. But I don't think there's anything unusual here unless you just said, hey, we don't want to do that many trees, or...
No, I don't hardly know what I'm talking about. I just wanted to make sure that when we turned, we went other places in the city, we weren't doing something like, well, why doesn't our city match itself, It's
right. Well, I think the city's done good. I mean, they've had kind of similar alignment, and those, it's the repetition. It's why you see every McDonald's look the same. It's why you see every General Motors Ford look the same. I mean,
Brandon.
branding, exactly. So we kind of are developing a kit of parts. So we have an opportunity here to kind of set a precedent going forward.
Question. When we get down here to the 45th Street corner, there has been a business there. There may be a business come back in. I don't have a crystal ball. We've got a business over here, and that's a great big lot, which would allow for another business probably, or what have you. Are those people going to want a lot of...
No. So commercial people think that trees are silos. I'll just be honest with you. They see a tree and it's a silo. You can't see through it. But I would tell you that if you go to the waterfront or somewhere like that, we've worked to bring all the trees up so you look right underneath them. They're no big deal. We even have signs in trees. So it's all in how you go about it. And it's really about rethinking. So this is kind of the bigger picture thing. So big tall signs, they work great on highways. You don't need them in a city on a 40-mile-an-hour road. You only need a sign that's this tall. And if you go look at all the great placemaking books, whatever you want to read, if you're trying to make your city feel better, the trees are an important aspect, and you work the other things to coincide and work together with them, so they dovetail.
So you're saying we would work with these businesses?
No, I'm just telling you, so we do commercial developments, we've done power centers that are 80 acres of Targets and Walmarts and all this stuff. If you're meeting with the person that's, some places like Target, they have a mindset and they have a manual that they want this kind of stuff. But I'm just telling you that a lot of people just see a tree and think you can't see through it. And what I'm telling you is that's why we kind of use the larger trees, for the most part, in front of those businesses, because you can limb them up so they're 12-foot clear, 14-foot clear. As they mature, you see right underneath them.
You change your signage ordinance to require signage to be on the ground.
Well, that's not really my question, because he brings up redoing the 45th Street,
Oh.
you know, and I have no clue what that is going to look like now.
We've tried to kind of build the intersections to accommodate some future growth. It's obviously not 5-lane, but there's some of that built into this now.
I've seen a lot of projects where they planted nice trees,
Oh, and they get wiped out.
and 2 or 3 years later, they're yanking them out.
Yeah.
Really makes me angry.
Good news for us, we probably won't do 45th in 2 or 3 years. Fortunately.
It's a great point, and so we've tried to kind of hold the trees back towards the property lines. Now here, these obviously aren't right there. Those right there, we already know what that looks like, so we just try to kind of keep the views open to their sign.
Yeah,
Things in
nice
front of it.
monument there, yeah. Want that.
Catholic care. So this is, I can get you copies and you can mark them up and give me ideas and we'll change it to what you want, but I'm just trying to kind of give you.
Okay, I want to ask her question backwards. For all the residences, how much privacy and noise reduction are these plantings going to provide?
Plantings make almost zero noise reduction. And when you just have a single rule, they're going to make a little bit, but it's not going to be of much consequence for the people that are.
So these are going to be tall enough trees that they won't really screen the houses
Some of the smaller trees, but we have a sidewalk through here, so we're going to want to arch that thing up and loom it up over time. So we don't plantings like this, and almost all plantings do not mitigate much noise unless you have a major green way in between. I mean major. What deflects noise better are walls, berms, something that's more solid than vegetation.
But you're still, like, in this area here, there are no trees there today.
Yeah, there's no.
So it's going to be better than what?
Just the one neighbor that
What's
has
there?
the trees, and nobody else has any.
Did you say you had some handouts or something, or
What
handouts is wrong?
What I can do is I just kind of wanted to get some ideas in front of you, and what I can do is I have small versions of these, I can send them to you, but when you try to, I didn't want to give you a whole plan set. I have a plan set that has, I don't know, 15 pages.
Well, I'm thinking of the tree board, and I don't see anybody in here from
Oh,
the
okay.
tree board,
Sure,
that they would like to, and,
certainly.
their input
I
would
think
be
we should
way
do
better
that.
than mine,
Yes,
because,
and I can provide kind of the preliminary
I
plan.
can grow sunflowers, but about everything else.
Maybe for you to even meet with them might
Yeah.
make sense
Sure.
to kind of show them some of the same plans here.
Can do.
I've got another bad question. So I've heard it being talked about that noise reduction on streets is kind of possibly not be as much of an issue in the future as people do more and more electric cars. Is this starting to be talked about in the industry, or is it so far out that it's not even
You'll see
discussed?
some electric cars when they're putting sound into them artificially, so that people
I saw it.
know they're coming.
They did it written that. Because
Tire noise is still going to be there, but yes, definitely.
that may be so far out, it's not worth thinking about. I was kind of wondering if you guys have started talking about it, just like even internally, whether someday that'll be a
Not
thing.
related to any real world project or anything, but
yeah, I guess suppose once we get to that point, if there will be reductions in noise, just is another benefit of going that direction. Which I still can't believe it myself. We're almost there, but
If I could just get a little more distance out of that.
yeah.
It is a different experience. Okay. Well, thank you. This has been very good, and it looks like a lot of great plans there. So I really appreciate it. Appreciate the work. But let's do plan a time when Jason can make a presentation to the tree board. That would be very helpful. Because it's not my expertise at all. And so they do have some good background.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Like I said, I don't know if there's any other issues you want to discuss, any questions you
There was
have.
a-
I didn't bring any displays of just what the roadway's like, but I know we have new people on the board here that maybe I should have. But
Yeah, well, yeah, we can just go around and introduce all the folks are, because we do have some new faces. I think you know Ty Lasher. This is Dr. Joe Schroeder, just elected to the council in November. And I think you know Justin Smith. I'm Jim Benage. I was on the council, and now I'm the mayor. This is John Welsh. He was just voted into the council a week ago. Is that right? I'm losing track of time already. So, very recently, anyway, replacing my council seat. And Diane Wynn, who's been on the council 2 years ago and then was elected.
No, it was longer ago than that.
Was it more than 2 years ago? Okay.
Yeah.
But then was elected to the council last November.
nice to meet everyone.
Okay. So I did have one question, and I don't know if we just dropped it or we're going to talk about it later or what the thought process is. But we had a series of residences along there from where Bob and Luigi's was down there along that side. Because of their close proximity to that road, they're very concerned about that. And I don't know if there was any more thought about their concept of a wall being put along there, or if there's been any discussion about that whatsoever beyond.
And-
Well, that was 6 months ago whenever
Yeah.
we brought that up, I don't know.
One of the issues was when we go to a field check, which was 50% plans, and we submit those to KDOT. KDOT starts an environmental process where they look at archaeological concerns, they look at drainage concerns, endangered species, and then one of the things they look at is whether or not there's noise concerns. They did look at it and said this project will not create any significant additional noise. In fact, what KDOT told me is we've never had a urban arterial in the state of Kansas that created the need to do that. It's not going to be that big of an increase. So I more or less dropped it at that point. I know there were still some of those folks were asking the question, well, does that mean we still can't have a wall? And I think my attitude was, as part of this project, the wall would be built on your own property, and the city would have to get easement. And then, since there's federal money, it's a long process. So I have talked to some of those people in meetings and just said it's probably not going to happen with this project.
Okay.
And I don't know if that means they accepted it. I know down south in some of the City, Wichita neighborhoods, there's some of the same concern, and I have met with a few of the residents down there to talk about the same issue,
Okay.
but basically told them the same thing.
Okay, well, so, and that's good to know that it's not part of the project, so we at least will have that in mind,
Yeah.
so we can have discussions of other options later, but yeah, okay, very good.
I know down on the south end, with the roadway, the roadway sits so up high now, I've been told they look out their kitchen window in the back and they're seeing tires on the cars. The roadway is going to lower, and that alone will make some difference from a visual standpoint, but it will also, I think, make maybe some improvement just on the road noise. They're not hearing that tire noise coming directly into their backyard.
Yeah, I think and I don't remember all the concerns, but I think some of the concerns were more of a safety issue because they're very close to that backyard. They have very little yards, some
And
of
it's
them like
just
11-foot yards or something like that.
And it's just at the speeds the vast majority of the vehicles travel. The yards are set far enough back to where it's not what we have a traffic engineering concern.
And I think it was especially a concern if we were pursuing the 5-lane option, if I recall.
Yeah, I think so.
We hadn't actually, I think, made a decision on 3-lane versus 5-lane when that issue was brought up.
Probably right.
Yeah, it was a bigger issue if we were going
It's
to
still a
5 lanes.
concern, I believe, but
Okay.
even more so in the 5-lane option.
Yeah. Okay, very good. All right, any more questions for these gentlemen? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your coming and making an update for us so we know where we are. And we're going to start seeing some things happen later in the year, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We're getting to the end of things.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to say that because the construction's a new beginning, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Okay, that, we ready to talk about streets, and we have Ms. Ann Stephanie.
What I'd like to do first, Mayor, is we've got 3 new council members, and there's been a lot of questions even from previous council members about how much we have to spend, and what about this land? What if we do something different with the land, and all of those types of things. So Ted and I wanted to spend some time and talk about the budget, which it's a little early for the budget, but when you're thinking about what you want to spend in street funds for this year, obviously it affects the budget. And then it will also affect future budgets. So Ted and I are kind of going to team present this, and we're going to talk about where we're at today, carryovers, reserves, all those types of things, what's going to happen down the road in the next 5 years or farther. We're going to talk a little bit about land, how that affects our budget, and things like that. So, Ted, I'll give this to you. You can start
stand up
with
there. Not used to having so many people here during a budget meeting. I appreciate it. Really, what I first, these decisions are very important for the city and you guys because there's not a lot of extra money running around, as you guys know. We have a lot of land debt that we look at every year and year out, and that's kind of what I wanted to go through. Just really the preliminary first 30 minutes we do every budget, just so you guys are aware of where this money's coming and the fact that it might not be there year after year after year after year. That what we're doing is spending money that we scrimp and save scrimp and save every year to build up so we can do a street project or another capital improvement project that is necessary or a priority. Ty changed my colors here. A lot of times I start with about the last 5 years where total assessed value is at. I went ahead and stretched it out all the way to 2003 just so you guys can kind of understand when I say the economic impacts of the city, how it affects our budget. You can tell we're just coming out of, or you can't really tell from here, we're just coming out of the 5-year growth. I tried to section off every 5 or 4 years, and 33.5% growth since 2000, from 2015 to 2019. Whereas you can see when the housing bubble hit, we were pretty stagnant in those 10 years before, and then of course that initial jump in the early 2000s when the building boom was coming. So I just want you to kind of imprint that in your mind that that's what we're always working for, and that's what our 30% reserve is all about, is to make sure we can weather some of these storms. It's always important to keep that in the forefront of your mind.
So this asset valuation is a combination of a couple of things. The growth is, one is increased property values of existing homes plus additional development.
Probably 90% of it is new buildings being built, new developments and businesses coming. Thank you for clearing that up because everybody got their evaluations earlier this week, so that's very good. A majority of this is, you wouldn't see I hope not, but a lot of this is taking a lot that's worth maybe, $10,000 and putting a $300,000 house on it, that's going to raise our valuation by $300,000. Or a big business coming in that has $1 million valuation, that really helps us out as well. And this is kind of what I just regurgitating a lot of slides you've seen before, and that's what I just wanted to note. Current economy, of course, nobody's really running for the hills yet, but it's always something we got to look after. Is are people investing, are developers investing, or are they staying stagnant? So something to always look for. This is about the first thing I show you guys, and it's probably the easiest way to budget. We start with our revenues on top, if you can see that far, and then you start subtracting things that we have to pay for, land debt, other debt the city has incurred over the years, and then you go to your special assessments. Personnel cost is really big. I always ask, would you like to fire anybody this upcoming year? If not, then that's pretty much one of our costs. There's relatively, you can do some things, but those really land debt, city at large debt, and personnel are our three biggest costs in the city. But once you get the fuel purchase, the supplies purchased, you get all the way down to amount remaining. It's about $200,000 on a normal budget, and that's just the structure of our budget. You don't really want to see a lot of money remaining because that means your structure is a little off on the revenue side. But you also don't want to see negatives, and because that means you're not doing enough to maintain the balance. I added future obligations. We just had a long meeting out at Woodlawn in 2024. You can see Woodlawn construction kind of hits our general fund, as well as you guys know, we had a balloon payment on our land debt, and in 2017 we kind of smoothed that balloon payment to incremental increases every year for the next 5 years. So we're still going in the middle of that, going incrementally up and up and up, until we rest about $1.5 million a year for debt service until 2034, I believe.
How much of that are we required to do?
Of what?
Of the accelerating amount we're paying?
So really, the way we designed it back in 2017, we really didn't want to see, it was, we could do it. We could have done a level, but it would have been about a $400,000 jump in 1 year. Instead, we just chose to stair step it and then kept it level. If that's what your question is.
Those increases
I'm asking
are
if that's obligated or we're just doing that because of land.
No, yeah, that's an obligated expense, and that covers principal and interest. Whereas before we were paying zero principal and all interest. So yes, that it's all due.
Okay.
Full.
It looked like it might have been optional, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, no, I wish. No. This is really what I showed maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and what I was kind of talking about is, this is really a model that I created as forecasts, and it looks at the structural balance of our city. And what I see in 2024, 25, 26 is we've got a few years there, like one maybe negative year, but we have a robust ending balance that we can capture that. And then as we continue to grow, our revenues go up and our expenses don't go up as much, and we regain that structural stability in our budget. So that's what's really concerning about why don't we keep taking out debt and keep doing major projects year after year after year, is because there's a limit, especially to our debt and then to what we can afford and still operate a city. So I don't show this to you to scare you. It's just something that finance directors do to make sure you guys are covered, we're covered. It's part of our job. I kind of always show this. This is how important the general fund is, and I really wanted to drill down into what we're talking about tonight. Is where does kind of some of our excess money, when I come and show you at the end of the years and say, hey, we saved $200,000. Well, that's a lot of money. We're not saving that on office supplies. What really happens is at the beginning of the year, we look at how many special assessments are due in our land bank and how much anticipated land sales we're going to have. So say I'm thinking we're going to sell $50,000 of land sales, but there's $300,000 a year we have to pay in special assessments. Well, what if we do $200,000 of land sales that year? Would I still transfer the money from the general to the land bank just because
for no good reason, and that's where a lot of the land sale, how it affects the general fund and how it frees up some of this money that we're deciding on what to spend today. And without those land sales, that would kind of not be as much. It would not be would not be as robust as what we're doing and talking about tonight. The other important thing, and this is more another illustration, is we were without about 2 police officers still, or without 2 police officers trying to get those filled. Several positions that always saves some money. So the lower we can get the special assessments, even the land debt, stuff like that, the more money we'll have in the end to be able to invest in large capital projects, such as street improvements that are needed. In 2019, again, we ended the year with about $400,000 more than we were anticipating. I think I talked about that enough. Can't see really well there, but if I just take this exact same numbers in our 2020 budget, that means we'll end with about 46% of our revenues when we're targeting about 30. So that excess money will be used next year or whenever you deem necessary for these one-time capital expenditures, because I say one-time because we're not sure it's going to ever come back. So we want to be very sure that we cash flow a lot of these projects. And when you kind of put it in the perspective, I just said let's take our forecast numbers on revenues. That means next year there might be around $900,000 sitting out there that we're above our 30% levels that we can choose to do any type of projects this council deems necessary. Before we get into a lot of this conversation on the streets, the number one thing everybody thinks, that's the number one thing surveys come after, but it's not really the only number one, or not really the only capital project the city really has. As you know, we put a new roof on the rec center, different projects like that, new gate system. I know the chief is talking about different facilities that his police officers might need. That's something that we'll put in the plan, and it basically, you judge on what you think is more important for the city and the priorities of the city, and that's where the city council really comes in, and that's where your major decision-making paralysis is. What do we do with this money, and what does the city need? So if you do, say, want to spend all of it right now, the risk you have is looking up there and saying, okay, well, in 2022, we might only have if everything goes as this forecast goes, we might only have about $186,000 to do anything with. So I would say if you want, our practice the last 3 years, and this is a brand new council, but our practice the last 3 years is we'd rather do a project, maybe 2 projects a year and continue the process versus maybe trying to do 7 or 8 in 1 year and then doing nothing for another 5. It's completely up to you guys, but it's one of those things that it's something to think about. Do we want to hang our hat every year on one project or 2 projects, or do we just want to do whatever we want and then suffer the consequences later on, to be frank?
I just want to make sure I understand that line 7. You're saying that you're predicting what we'll have in this reserve fund above the 30% is going to be $300,000?
No. So line 7 is your operating balance. So that's every year your revenue minus the operating expenditures, meaning personnel, contractuals, debt only.
So you think we're going to have $30,000 above budget in 2021?
300,000.
300,000.
Yeah, I mean,
that's your guess.
There's absolutely zero capital. There's no transfers in that number.
Okay, and so then if we sold a bunch of land, that might change, or we hire a bunch, or we spend more, that could change. That's just your guess on how much we're going to be over. And then in 2020,
educated guess.
Yeah. And I realize we're never going to have any.
There's formulas behind that spreadsheet.
Yeah. So, and then by 2024, which we're not going to have a surplus. So you're kind of just suggesting that if we spent it all at once, we might not have any at some point at all, and then we might only not have any. We might even, if the economy crashes,
well, yeah,
we might not that the city's going to go under, I'm not doom and glooming, but you're just saying that's what you're trying to tell us with these numbers.
And that's really, I'm really just showing you what the model shows, and that when you add a couple $100,000 in 1 year to debt service like Woodlawn, it's going to affect our budget considerably. So it might not, it might be a good idea to have a little bit of excess reserves so that you can do projects in those years and feel like you're contributing. And that's just my...
So don't go borrow a bunch of money to do a bunch of
Well, I won't.
projects.
I haven't really let it. I've been pretty adamant in that one-time expenditures are the way to go for the city of Bel Aire until we get out from under the. And when you talk about Woodlawn, that's one of those projects where if federal government's going to cover 80% of this project, that's something we need to jump all over, and that's very important to do that and to make way for those projects. But if we're talking, hey, we haven't done anything in 20 years, let's start doing every artillery street. Well, maybe we be more selective on that. So I think now is Ty's portion of the program, but
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about land, because that's obviously, Ted said that's one of the biggest expenditures that we have to deal with. So this is just a map. You can see the zoning districts. All I wanted to see is what's in purple is industrial ground, and the rest of it is like agriculture and things like that. So this is what we still own. We've talked about this 1,000 acres. So you can see what's available. That's 80 acres. The rest of it that's not colored in, that's all things that's all property that we own. And that's available for sale. Here's the Sunflower Commerce Park. Again, we have some lots available in there. This is Sunflower Commerce Park Phase 2, so that's on the north side of 53rd. There's Epic Sports is there. They've got a contract to buy that 100 acres, and then we've got some additional for sale. Again, all of our industrials set for $25,000 an acre. That's what we're offering it. The rest of it's at $10,000 per acre. This is Central Park. It's $1.50 a square foot is what we're offering. One thing to keep in mind, hopefully, we'll be getting a contract on that, and maybe $1 million. But you remember Ted was talking about special assessments. That $1 million is going to pay off the special assessments. So if that happens, that we make a sale of $1 million, it goes out on special assessments, and that won't be a dime that we bring in to help anything. Now it does help in the long term, because that's $100,000 a year in special assessments, so that frees up $100,000 a year for us. But if hopefully the public will see $1 million sale, and I just don't want everybody to think, oh, we've got $1 million now. It's going to be gone. These are some of the lots that we own in Central Park. We didn't pay for those. When the bank took that over, they sold some of them to the developers, and they just gave those to the city. So they didn't cost us anything. The lots are $25,000 for sale. This is Tierra Lakes again. What's in red is what we don't own, but the rest of it is owned by the city. Again, we got those from a tax sale. So I wanted to talk a little bit about budget history, because the idea of history is you don't want to make the same mistakes you did. So when I got here in 2007, all the land was already purchased. We were at 24 mills. We had a general fund reserve of $180,000, 7% of our budget. You've got Ted now saying we're at 46%. So it took us 10 years to get to where we're at on reserves. We had 49 full-time employees. We had a $22 million debt at 7.5% interest. So over that time, a lot of things changed. So just pulled out another year, 2011. That's where we had to address all those issues. We went to 39 mills. General reserves were up $580,000, still 14%. The industry standard, city standard, is 30%. We dropped to 39 full-time employees. So you can see what happened to attack that debt was we raised the bill and we laid off people. So at 2020, we're at 42 full-time employees. We were able to bring on a couple We're at 45 mills. Over that time period, we raised a couple. But you can see the big thing is we're at 2.8 million in reserves, or 46%. So it took us 10 years to get there. And then when Ted's showing you, you could spend down some reserves, you can. But if things change, it can take years to get that built back up. And the reason we have reserves is if a road failed and you said, we've got to fix 53rd, nobody can drive on. We either close it or fix it. And it's $300,000. You can come to us and we can say, okay, we can get you $300,000. It's going to get some of our reserves, but it's there. And so that's the importance. Or a tornado comes through and we've got to fix roads and things. So that's the importance of why we think it's needed. So we talked about land sales, and we just went through the interviews with marketing companies. They came in and gave their ideas and thoughts. So we've got 1,000 acres. Industrial is 25,000 per year. All the others 10,000 a year. Land debt is 17.3 million outstanding. So we would have to sell the rest of that 1,000 acres for 17.3 to pay it off. So you remember some of them were saying, well, your land's too high. Mm-hmm. So that's what the 25,000 per acre and the $10,000 per acre would pay that off. Mm-hmm. If we could sell it for that. Mm-hmm. Or if we averaged it and said, listen, the 25,000, we're going to drop that to 10. We're just going to sell everything for 10. Then we can do it. But if we were just going to sell it all, it's got to be 17.3 average per acre. So what would happen is if we said we're going to sell it all for 10,000 an acre, then we would defease 9.8 million. So our annual debt cost would then reduce to 525,000 a year. It's about at 1.5 right now. So so that pays off. We have about 7.5 million that we'd have to pay. We'd have no land. It would just be a general fund debt that we'd have to pay every year. If we dropped it to 5,000 per acre, that would defease 4.9 million. Our annual debt service would be 780,000. So we would drop from the 1.5 to 780, and we remain $12.4 million. So again, just some ideas as we're talking about marketing, as we have marketing agents come in saying, this is what you need to do with your price. This is where we're at. This is what happens. So those are just, like I said, those are just some thoughts for you to be thinking about now as Ann starts talking about all the money she wants to spend on roads. And we all know that needs to take place.
Right.
For example, in 2011, when I was looking at the budget, we spent $180,000 on street repairs. Again, because we had to make cuts. And so that's exactly why we have so many roads that need repaired, because we weren't spending the money back then. We've got the breathing room now. We can start spending money. But we just want you to know where we've been, what can happen if we spend too much. Or is it that we want to make sure that we're doing road improvements every year for a certain amount? So I'll turn it over to Ann.
Can I ask you
Yes.
questions about that? Now, those prices would get more complicated because we would get taxes back. Some of them maybe not very much, possibly. So if you figured the taxes that we would gain into that, and maybe tax, revenue we'd get in taxes, those numbers get a lot more complicated. Is that right?
So two things that complicate it. One is specials, because Ted said you saw we were paying specials. So if we sold it all, then we wouldn't have specials anymore. So that would be a benefit. The taxes on farm grant isn't going to be great. Now, if it gets developed, and again, that's where we talk about, do we want to sell it to an investor who's going to hold it for 10 years, or do we want to sell it to really somebody that's going to develop? And then, yes, then you start putting houses on there, then you're right.
So do we consider giving cheaper prices to people who are developing, or is that not normally how it's done compared, see if someone's just going to hold on to it, we say, well, if you're just going to hold on to it, you're going to pay the full price. Do we calculate in, okay, if you're going to develop this, we're going to get this much in taxes? I mean, is that something we always consider when we're talking to people about it, or does the price of land just not matter, or, I mean,
So what we've done is basically we've sold it for the market. So Gene Vitarelli has been buying for Rock Springs along 53rd. He's been paying 10, 12,000 an acre. And so that's what we've been selling it for, is 10, 12, because he's willing to buy it and develop it. Now that's a discussion that we'll probably want to have when you employ the marketing agent is, okay, so what about this? What if we would offer to a developer a different price and guarantee that they're going to start construction in a year or something like that?
Yeah, because the math on that, I can't do it in my head. I cannot, I don't really know. It just gets so complicated so fast, and without putting that on a spreadsheet, I don't even know what to suggest. But it seems like it starts getting more complicated on the pricing depending on what happens with the land tax.
Yep, and we could look at that if that was something. Ted'd be happy to put a spreadsheet together. He likes those. So.
I've said this many times before. I think whenever you do any land deals, you need to make sure there's a component in there that guarantees a project, a construction, something that gives a win-win for the city and the buyer. Okay, if you just sell it outright, you don't have that. And then you end up with these.
And you can put clawbacks in them, right? If they don't start building after a certain amount of time, we get the land back. I mean, you can put all that stuff in the contract.
Exactly. Right. Yep. Yeah. So that's a good discussion that we need to have.
Okay, but that's another night.
Yep, we're going to do that. Right. Your fault. You're tracking well. So tonight, Ann wants to spend money. So let's hear what she's got to spend money, and you can tell her how much you have because she has to spend.
So what I did for tonight is and following on our conversation last month, I put together kind of a list of what I feel are the most important projects to pursue. I've got them in my priority order, but my priority order is a little different than what your priority order is going to be, because I'm not taking into account as much of the input from the citizens. I'm taking strictly into account the roads, where they're at now, where they could be at, and what money is going to need to be put into the roads to keep them in a certain condition. And that's, as I go through this, I'll kind of explain some of that, and I did try and put that in my report. Just as a review, and this was at our February meeting, the roads consist of new roads that are built today, consist of several layers. Old roads, you had the concrete or asphalt slab on top, and then you had the base course. You didn't necessarily have anything in between. Roads today are built with one or two different base courses and then the original ground that we're sitting on. That ground is usually worked up, it's scarified, kind of like you do in a garden. You till it up and then you compact it back, and then you build your surface from there. So as we go through and look at some of these roads and some of the patch repairs and deficiencies, a lot of those deficiencies are coming from deficiencies down below just the strict surface. It's coming from further down. So when we have to go through and over excavate to fix those areas, you can't really tell all of those from the surface. You've got to wait until you got to get the surface off and start preparing that road to build it back up. So as kind of an overview of the priority projects, the asphalt and concrete patch repair work throughout the city, the slurry seal and restriping of Rub Road and Greenwich Road, reconstruction of 53rd from Oliver to Woodlawn, thermal crack repair on Oliver, and the reconstruction of Batten between Kruger and 48th. As we kind of jump through each of these individually, the patch repair is probably my most important project. Throughout the year, we get calls from citizens that are concerned about their street. These are small patches, usually maybe 5 feet to 20 feet long, some are longer. There are a variety of different issues. I just took some pictures of some of the areas that are in question. As from the bottom two pictures, you really see those curbs heaving. And a lot of that, it just happens. These streets have been in for years and years and years. I know since Bel Aire was really developed. Most of the streets are fine, but there's some patch repairs that are needed. So that's where these are coming in. We always tell, when we get a citizen concern, we tell them we'll look at it, we'll see if there's something that we can do in the meantime, but we'll put it on our list for next year. and tell them if the council gives us money, we'll go ahead and get those fixed for you. But we do what we can, but we can't always fix it ourselves. Our staff is very skilled at doing flat work, asphalt repairs. We're learning how to do concrete. Curbs is a little bit different animal that takes different equipment that we don't have at this point. It takes a special set of skills that our crews are not versed in. So we do leave the curbs and some of the larger patch repairs for contractors like PP&J. Some of the other concerns are when we're on major streets, the safety aspect and the liability. We always leave those for the outside contractors so they have that liability and not the city. The slurry seal and restriping of Webb and Greenwich, the city went out, we hired PP&J a couple years ago, I think 2018, to go out and do some crack sealing and thermal crack repairs on these roads, similar to what city staff did in the neighborhoods of Park Vista and Bel Aire Heights. We went through the next year and did a slurry seal on top of those because we need to keep those roads in good condition. This is step one of a multi-stage process. The second step would be to go through and slurry seal and restripe. As you can see in some of these pictures, you've got an outside lane marking and you can kind of sort of see the center lane markings. There's no middle, there's no delineation between the two lanes, specifically on Webb Road. And that's a concern, especially when you're driving at night. It's really difficult to see even the center lane markings as you're driving at night. That's a safety concern, and that's something that, as we look in, the striping is $33,000, but if we're going to do that now and we come back next year or this year and do the slurry seal, you're going to have to pay it again. So it makes more sense to do it together than to separate them out.
That's a lot more than I thought for striping.
And there's a lot of areas.
I'm wondering.
There's a lot of areas in the city that need to be striped. The city does have their own striping machine. We have gone through and done that, and you wouldn't imagine how many complaints we received. We just have basically a parking lot striper, and we're trying to do major roads. Sillicin and Construction, Sillicin has one of the big striping machines, and so they get it straight as an arrow, where we're affected by every single bump. If there's a piece of gravel in the street, it jostles the machine. Every single person has tried it. I believe there's some previous council members have tried it. The previous public works director tried it. And because, why can't you get this straight? Well, it's not as easy as it looks. So we have a small machine versus big machine, so that's why it's as expensive as it is. There are other areas in the city that really need to be restriped, such as 53rd Street near the school. And we'll say, coming out of the school, those markings are pretty much gone. So something that we need to think about in the future, maybe a citywide striping project. But to get started, this would work.
So do we need to sell that striping machine then if it's not doing us any good?
It does us good when we're looking at parking lots. We've used it before.
For the rec center.
For the rec center, yep. A lot of times we sub out the striping with any parking lot improvements because it's easier to get it all done by one company. We've talked previously about putting in bicycle markings on the shoulders of Oliver. That could be done with the striping machine. So there is some use to it. We can certainly sell it too. We're not going to get a whole lot out of it, maybe a couple thousand, but in my opinion, it's worth keeping around for those small instances where we need it.
Okay. When you bring somebody in for the striping, the incremental cost for another mile, is it linear cost or is it a big upfront cost to get them here and then each additional mile is not that expensive? I'm just trying to understand if we're going to do striping, is there a really huge significant advantage in doing a bunch of striping all at once, or does it not really matter?
There is an economy of scale to that, so the more you have, the less it's going to be. But I don't believe it's linear, but I don't have that information. I've never really asked them about that. And if you guys are interested in doing additional striping,
I just think the economic side of that is something that we probably should be aware of, at least in this case. If we do have other places that need striping, and maybe the minimum charge for striping is $30,000, and then for each additional mile is $5 more, then it may be worth advancing some other striping projects. At the same time.
Total mileage that you're looking at doing here with this slurry seal and striping?
It's about 3 miles,
3
because
miles
each
total.
section is about 1.5 miles, but Webb is 4 lanes, whereas Greenwich is 2. So not quite apples to apples,
All right, okay,
but close.
okay, good, thank you. All right.
Maybe. There we go. The next project, the reconstruction of 53rd Oliver to Woodlawn. I threw this in there because it's very important. It does need to be done at some point in time. I'm not saying it necessarily needs to be done this year, but I want to make sure I'm keeping this in front of you. We have sunk in 30 to 40,000 the past couple years for patches. Every single patch that we've done, it needs another patch the next year on the adjacent side, either the east or the west. So that's something that you guys need to think about as we're developing Bristol Hollows, which is going to be coming online here within this year. That's going to be construction traffic going up and down. You're going to be putting more and more heavy equipment on these roads. Now, the senior residences that's on 53rd and Oliver, I can get them to come off of Oliver. The last drawing I seen from them, they didn't have any entrances off of 53rd. So that's doable, but Bristol Hollows is a concern. I talked with Boffman Company. They've got another subdivision just adjacent to Bristol Hollows that they're talking about. And they're also talking about in addition to Chapel Landing, and I don't know quite where that is. So maybe not necessarily this year, even though it is one of my priority streets. You guys need to make sure you're aware and constantly, maybe not constantly, but definitely thinking about this as you're talking about funding in streets.
My one concern there is when we get into this road, I don't want to do a halfway job. I want to do a job that's going to last. Mm-hmm. And so I would be more in favor of waiting a year and spending $1 million to do a job that's going to last instead of spending $450,000 a year this year. And then in 2 years you say, well, we need to spend another $1 million because that's not adequate. Or it's deteriorated or it's done whatever.
Yeah.
I don't want to see another. And my feelings about what happened on 53rd, between Rock and Woodlawn. I don't want to see us do that again.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Brand new concrete street is what I think needs to be there.
well, I'm not sure concrete is necessary, but I do think it should be done.
After the construction's done?
Smart. We got to do it smart.
After construction of,
You said they were going to be driving construction vehicles down there.
Oh,
If they're
sure.
going to be tearing up the road anyway, do we wait until they're done tearing up the road before we replace it?
we can. That's one of the streets that we get calls on very frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, your wife, I believe, drives down it almost every day.
Oh yeah, I get daily updates.
And I get almost daily updates.
I mean, those potholes are like bottoming out cars. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's like a dangerous situation.
Yeah.
You know,
It needs to be addressed, but I don't want to do
it's
halfway job.
okay right now. I mean, the way we've been patching it is
So-
noticeably better.
The concrete patches are holding better, but
Yes.
there's still problems around them because
Correct.
now that's a harder surface and you got a softer surface coming right up to it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's a few other areas that are developing problems as well. So those are going to be popping up. And I don't have that crystal ball. I can't say they're going to pop up tomorrow. I can't say they're going to pop up in a year from now. I want to make sure it's forefront on your minds as you're reviewing stuff. It's definitely a lot of money and definitely deserves consideration and planning.
Okay, thank you.
The crack sealing and thermal crack of repair of Oliver from 37th to 53rd. These are some big old cracks.
Yeah.
And as I was talking to some of the staff that have been here for 20 plus years, under two of the public works directors ago, they actually used to go out and stripe and take care of the cracks on Oliver. But due to the budget cuts, staff cuts, and the new people coming in, we stopped doing that some years ago. And so these have just gotten worse. One of the reasons now that we don't have our staff go and do the major intersections like this is the traffic. The traffic on Oliver has increased significantly in the past couple of years, and it's probably only going to increase more. And I don't want to put our staff at risk. I don't want the city to take on that liability of something happening, and I'd rather have a contractor do that. They're more used to working in high traffic situations than our staff is. So
One, and I asked you this before the meeting, just so that that's out in the open about, the west side of this road is Wichita and the east side is Bel Aire. So have we approached Wichita about sharing any of the cost and doing any of this work on this road?
In maintenance, no, because the road is entirely owned by the city of Bel Aire, and it is our responsibility to maintain. Now, if we would go to Wampo, I did propose this as one of the projects for Wampo. It did not get selected, but that's when we would go with Wichita. Wichita's helped us out on other maintaining projects. If you want me to, I can certainly ask them, but since it is our road, I would anticipate that it would be, they would say, no, that's your road. But I'm happy to ask. It doesn't hurt.
I certainly think it's something worth asking about.
Okay.
I mean, the worst that they can say is no.
No. Yeah.
At least I hope that's the worst they can say. I don't want to. They're not going to fix Rock Road either, right?
Right. Yep.
And they need to fix that too.
We need to fix the intersection of Fifth and Rock.
The intersection and that street to the railroad track.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've had, I know I've talked with council members, Wichita council members about it, and I haven't heard anything come back about that. I don't know if you've talked with the public works people at all.
The number one street the city hall gets called complaints on is the Wichita side of the Rock. Bel Aire, sorry.
Yeah.
Bel Aire.
Yeah.
We get a call a day, a call a week.
I wish we could get those calls into Wichita.
Yeah. We direct them towards
I guess
Wichita.
we can put our sign there.
Yeah.
Phone number.
Here's their number.
For complaints, call. Yeah, I'm happy to reach out to their city engineer and ask if there's any possibility for assistance with this, since they do have land on the other side.
Right. Yeah, we don't get a tax base for that.
Yep.
They do. So. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And this number that I put together, I just estimated that it's similar to the Greenwich project. So just that's where I got the number from. It's going to be up or down. I don't have a firm estimate on it. But
And is that estimate for a single crack or?
No.
I can count them. I can drive from 37th Street to my house blindfolded by the cracks.
Yes, no, that is the entire road.
Okay.
The bigger cracks that you're seeing on here are closer to 37th. There's not a whole lot as you get closer to 45th and then beyond, but there are the smaller cracks that just plain need to be sealed. That's a lot cheaper than coming through and doing the thermal clock repair, which is 1.5 to 2 feet wide with asphalt in it. So the reconstruction of Batten from Kruger to 48th, my estimate is about $400,000. As you can see from the condition of the roadway, and these are obviously selected pictures of the worst areas, it's bad. It's a priority. We've been talking about it for several years. The reason it is last is because there's nothing else we can do. We can't do a crack seal. We can't do a seal coat. We can't do a slurry seal to preserve it. It's got to be completely torn out and replaced. Tear out the curb and gutter, tear out the street. It's got to be done. Period, end of story. I'm not arguing one bit that it needs to be done, because it does. That's where, fortunately, I step back and you guys take over and you decide your priorities. So it definitely needs to be done. We talked last year, roughly this time, and the council's wish at that time was to do reconstruction every other year of A Street and then do rehabilitation every other year. So you've got kind of alternating years. In my opinion, patch repair needs to be done every year to some extent, and then you can choose depending on funding available. We do have about 3 other streets in town, and I don't have a list with me, that Batten is probably one of the 2 worst in town. I'm not going to say which level it is, but there's I know at least Belmore is similar state, but Batten is pretty bad. The difficult thing on this one, it is a very long stretch. I have been told that there are people on there with limited mobility, and so the actual construction of it, reconstruction of it, is going to be a big pain for the residents. They're going to be very happy once it's done, but getting through that project is going to be a pain. I wouldn't want to do the east half and then the west half, because that creates continuity issues. You would have to either do half at a time, like the north half and then the south half, or maybe section it off in thirds. But every additional section you do is just gonna up the cost because it's more time involved.
The cost estimate that's there is do it all at once.
It's.
The 400,000.
Pretty much.
Okay.
You're not going to, if you do it in 3 sections, you may be looking at 420 to 450. It's not going to be a huge increase, but you're not talking like 500, 600. You're talking less than that. And I have not talked to any contractors on this, so that's my estimate. On this one, I will caution that as we tear that up and as we start getting into the street, there's going to be, without a doubt, some soft sections that need change orders to tear out, put low consolidated soils in there and put or rock or something, so when we repave it, we don't have those soft spots again. That happened with hedgerow. We had half a dozen spots that we needed to come back and replace. I can look at it now and say, well, I'm assuming that this space and this space and this space, just based on the cracking patterns, but when you get down to it, some of those will go away just because of the age of the asphalt or the wear on the asphalt, and you're finding other ones. So it's not something that's very easily identified ahead of time, but it's going to happen. So it's something that you guys need to be aware of. There is no storm sewer on this street. If we want to put storm sewer in, there's a slim possibility, and it would need to be engineered with a survey, because there is the drainage ditch about a half a block to the south on Kruger that might be able to be tapped in, but that's going to be much more disruption to the neighborhood and to those residents along that street. And if you wanted to put storm sewer in, the largest possibility would be to get it at the intersection of Batten and Kruger, but that's going to all depend on sizing of pipes and whether it's even feasible with the existing elevation of the land. I don't know. As I was out there taking pictures, there's a slim possibility we could get it done, but I don't know. With that,
So kind of walk through us a little bit. What's the advantage and disadvantage of the storm sewer over doing what currently is there? And I think we have some residents here that have lived there for some time. They may be even tell us what they've experienced. I don't know.
really the only advantage of the storm sewer would be getting the water off the street sooner. And sooner is relative, because I don't think we're going to want to take it all the way up, because that's going to be $1 million plus, I'm guessing. Storm sewer is very expensive. It's very disruptive to the neighborhood and to the homes. So that would be the advantage. You get the water off the street. The way it is now, as we're planning, we're replacing the street and the curb and gutter. If you get the curb and gutter to flow in one continuous manner, you can see there's places where it's heaved up. That's stopping the water right now, so you're not going to have the bird baths that you do now.
And what about the risk as far as uncovering utilities or the sewer and water systems? Do we have high confidence we know where all that is? Say we go with the 400,000 and do the whole thing. What's the risk of, oh no, there's something, the sewer line wasn't where it was supposed to be, that kind of thing?
The sewer and water we have pretty high confidence in. We can locate all of those. Mm-hmm. The risk is going to be water service lines, because sometimes your water main is usually about 3 to 4 feet below the surface, so we should be fine on the main. Sometimes when the services come out, you don't know what contractors do. Sometimes they bring it up. If there's a raise in it, it may get hit depending on what sort of treatment we use for the base. There's a possibility there. I don't know where the gas, electric, the cable is. There's a possibility of that. But mostly the street would be going back to the same grade that it is now. It's just going to be smoothed out.
I know last time we talked about this was, I think, the number one thing that we wanted to do from a reconstruction project perspective, and we did want to do the reconstruction project every other year. So I guess the question I have is that the big thing that was on your priority list ahead of this is around the slurry seal and restriping of Webb and Greenwich. And the other thing that we've said is it's really important to make sure we prioritize maintenance on the roads ahead of reconstruction, because if you don't maintain it and it gets to a failed state, then you're reconstructing a main road. And so can you help us understand with the Webb and Greenwich roads, where are we on that spectrum of them needing maintenance? Is this maintenance that is recommended this year, but the impact of deferring it till next year is almost none? Or is this maintenance that we must do this year, or we do start to head down that path of the road needing reconstruction?
Sure. And I do have kind of a slide summarizing everything, what you're looking at as far as costs. The Webb and Greenwich Road, it could probably last another year if you wanted to defer that to next year. I would put it as a high priority next year, just because it's been a couple of years since we did the patchwork. I know on Webb Road there's some locations that need patching now before they can slurry it, and that was in their cost estimate. I don't want to get too far down the road because we're going to be developing more of those patches. So if you want to, none of these road situations are a do or die. None of these roads are, if you don't do them this year, you're going to be facing $10 million of road works next year. It's all in kind of a hedging your bets and deciding, we have X number of dollars available, how can we spend it to the best of our abilities with taking citizen considerations in mind.
I have a question. Is it not over in the Baton Kruger area where there's been a woman who fell and was hurt badly, and maybe a couple of others, because I know I talked to an elderly lady who said she wasn't hurt badly, but she'd sprained her ankle or something because she stepped off of the curb and into a...
Yeah, that happened on Stratford, I think. But there may be multiple. I only know of one incident, but that was Stratford.
No, the one I talked to, it was Baton.
Oh, okay. So
I don't remember her name, and she gave me her address at the time, but I've forgotten it, other than the Baton part
right
by now.
And I don't mean to be flippant at all, but we do have calls like that at least once or twice a year, and we do our best to try and take care of them and to get out there and to address any issues. Baton has been one that unfortunately has been kind of pushed off and pushed off and pushed off, because there's really not much that we can do from a public works standpoint to address any of the issues without completely tearing it up. And it becomes more of a where do you stop type of thing than the Stratford one and some of the other ones that I showed you on the first slide. Those are very isolated areas. Baton it's a mess, the entire road. There's places that are worse than others, but it's difficult.
So I have an idea that's mainly a question. Obviously, Baton, I think Baton needs to be a strong focus for us this year, just based on everything we're talking about and seeing. With regards to the Webb striping issue, if it's would you characterize the striping as like either equal or greater part of the danger rather than the condition of the road? How would you set the striping versus the condition of the... Okay, so, I mean, one of the things I've seen, and I have no idea if this would apply here, but I'm thinking in terms of how could we delay Webb another year, maybe 2 years, is, they make those little rubber reflector flaps that you can put on you can identify the lanes with those things. I don't know how long those last, if we could use it, but it could at least give reflective lane indicators that would be helpful to drivers. I mean, I know I've encountered those all over the place, and they always seem to be pretty helpful at night. I don't know if we can use those or not, but it's just an idea of, instead of doing striping, putting something that helps drivers out.
I'll definitely look
something
into
to look
it,
into.
Yeah, that's something that
if
we have not looked into at this point.
I don't know. I think that needs to be above Webb in priority. Just one idea.
Sure. So. Yeah, we'll definitely look into
it.
And
I don't know how much effort it would be for staff to use our striper that does it crooked, but some crooked stripes that were there for a year would be better than no stripes.
That's true.
For a year, that might be what we'd want to do if it wasn't something that would take staff a year to do. And so that you'd have to help us think
Right.
through the economics and the investment there. But
It takes pretty much our entire staff. I would say kind of estimating about a week, because it takes time to, number one, get used to using the equipment again. It's very pain to clean. You've got to have staff behind, in front, and then several staff working the machine. So it's a pretty big undertaking.
okay.
And we can, if that's your wish, your directive, we can certainly work it in. Our staff is very full, and we just got a resignation notice today, so we're down one more person. So just trying to work through stuff and then prioritizing maintenance projects. Public Works isn't one of those things that you can kind of definitively say how many of any given things. We need to exercise water valves every year. Well, we don't have enough staff to exercise them every year, so we exercise a quarter of them every year, or percentage. And so the maintenance can get deferred until it gets deferred to a point where you don't really see it, or you start noticing it. So we can certainly work it in. I'm not saying that we can't, but just other things slide.
Absolutely.
So, go on.
On the issue of some of the residents not being able to get in or out, that occurred when they redid Edgemore. Okay, and I always hate to bring up Edgemore because it is wonderful. Everybody goes, how did you get that through? I didn't, you know.
I don't know if we have these on mic, but I think some folks are not able to hear you right now. And I know the mic is on, but is it on? Is it on the overhead?
He just doesn't know how loud she is, so he doesn't know he's supposed to turn it up.
Yeah.
He can't. He's in a box, so he doesn't know how loud she is.
Just turn it down for that. Anyway, the contractor that they used, and it was not one that I've seen in Bel Aire a lot, but they were very good, and at the initial meeting with the residents, that came up, and he worked with the people who really needed it. Now, there was one person who said they really needed it, and it was kind of a bogus type of thing. He worked the best he could with those people as well, just so he could get to work and get the job done. And so that might be a stipulation that kind of needs to be in the bidding process. We have an issue here, or issues, if need be, so that they are aware of it and they may have some fix.
And we can certainly work through that to the best of our ability. We will have a pre-construction meeting if we do choose to go ahead with Baton. We'll have a pre-construction meeting with the residents and those affected in that neighborhood. I know that some contractors are better than others about working with residents. Some just want to get it out and get it done, and they don't care. They're paid for a job. They're not paid to do anything extra. And then there's others that really, truly care and want to really make the job what it is. And I'm not going to say which ones are good or bad, or there's good days and bad days for everybody. So working through that is going to be tricky. If we choose a contractor that has had a good day on a project and maybe a not so good day on the Baton project, we're going to hear about it. So it's just something that the city needs to be aware of, and you as council members need to be aware of. And I'm sure any contractor that we choose is going to do their best to get a good project for us.
I think we have a citizen who wants to speak.
Yes.
And we are, just so you know, the rules on this, because we have a lot of folks here. 5 minutes, you can speak. You need to give us your name and address, and then you're on the clock.
My name is David Barrientos. I've been a resident at 4730 North Baton for the last 33 years. And I like the direction everything is going. I have to strongly recommend that street be repaired. There's a lot of stuff that flows down the streets, parts of the previous street. those get in front of your yard and you do get a lot of overflowage of water, okay? Now, if you clear that off about every week, the water does flow pretty darn good through the area that I'm at, okay? So I think by fixing the street, I think the drainage would be okay. I have one concern towards actually doing the construction, and that is because we take care of my father-in-law, who is 95 years old, who on a daily basis is picked up at 8 o'clock in the morning and is brought back to our home at about 2:30 in the afternoon. Okay, so working with the council like this, I'd like to keep in touch and be able to share that information.
Is your father-in-law wheelchair bound?
Yes.
We could possibly work something out to where he was at another place for a couple of days, outside of our home. But we would have to know definitely, in advance to be able to.
So is your father-in-law wheelchair bound?
Yes, he is.
And based on the hedgerow project, which was a similar length, that was done, I believe, in 2 segments, and each segment was closed down, I want to say, for about a month. So it's not a short period. It is, and I realize, and that's why I'm trying to bring this up, it is not an easy project, and it is going to disrupt a lot. But you're going to be really happy with it when it's done.
Place. I hate more construction being done on the road in front of business.
Thank you. Okay. So it sounds like there's consensus. Oh, another citizen would like to speak.
My name is Jim O'Reilly, and I live at 4760 North Baton. And I went southbound from my home to the end of Baton, did 180, went all the way up to 48th Street, and I took a series of pictures. I think the pictures on the screen didn't do justice to the magnitude of the problem. I dog-eared some of the pages there of the very worst cases, and they're worse than they appear in that series of pictures because it was raining yesterday. You can't see the bottom of the ruts for the rainwater. And we're leaving ruts in the base. We're not knocking out pavement. We're leaving ruts in the dirt under the pavement. And there are at least two places where that is occurring. And we would really like to see the priority eased up from the 5th or 6th place that was represented on the charts. And we're aware that it will take a long time to do it right. In our case, we could park on the rec center and use our back fence. But not everybody has that possibility. And so that's it.
Thank you.
And I'd like to speak.
Yes, please.
My name is Sandra Nichols. I have lived at 4749 North Baton for 43 years. And I did make a presentation here a few months ago, and I collected signatures. But the one thing that I would like to emphasize is that all of you are pretty young, and a lot of you may live in the newer houses. And sometimes I feel like we get overlooked, but I would like you to understand that most of the people that have lived on that block have been there since, I think we moved in 74, so maybe late 60s, late 70s. But I thought I'd do a little math on that, and I'm not sure what our taxes are, but I think they're around maybe $1,600. Let's say 43 years ago they were $1,300, I don't know. But if I took that time 43 years, it comes up between $55,000 and $65,000 that we have paid in. There's approximately 20 houses on those 2 blocks. If you multiply that by the number of houses, 20 houses, you come up to over $1 million. The people on that block have been there paying taxes, and we were here before Bel Aire was a city. We were the ones that were out voting and helping this city to become a city. and we have supported the city for over 40 years. And I would like you also to take that into consideration when you're looking at our streets. And the last thing I would like to say, I hope you all have been down on Baton. If you have not, you need to go. And secondly, Baton is a through street for the rec center.
Yes.
In the summer, there are lots of games there. There's lots of games and things in the wintertime. So that street is used excessively. I think, on your plan, you may have seen 48th Street as a through street. And indeed, it is used. But you would be amazed at how many cars go down Baton to go to the rec center. That's all I want to say.
I've used Baton to go to the rec center. I know it gets used all the time. It's like this little cutoff road, so I'm sure that's true.
I do it too. Yeah. Okay, very good.
I would just like to add one thing, that Baton is a safety hazard, all right? Kind of in front of Santa's house off to the north. There is a big rut in the street, and every time it rains and the garbage men come by, the rut gets deeper. Now, I can see a lawsuit maybe resulting from an accident against Bel Aire. If two cars are passing in opposite directions at 30 miles an hour, maybe at night, they don't see that big rut there, or they see it and try to avoid it. This street has its hazards. And by the way, our mailman says that it is the worst street in Bel Aire. and we're very grateful that all of you do recognize the problem.
Okay. Ted, look, I just want to get me recentered here on the finances. You're saying we move over about $550,000 a year, or this year, planning on moving that over, and then we had a little bit there, $216,000, and no guarantee that we're going to be able to do that year to year, and that's pretty much what we have to work with. Is what you're thinking?
So in the capital improvement reserve right now, we have 766,500 and some change. Really the only thing, and I know I put on the schedule a lot of projects that are out there, those are, they could probably all be to be determined. Take for instance, keyless entry for this building. It's a great idea. It's probably not a high priority, but I put it on there. The staff tries to keep you guys updated on what our needs are. It's probably not going to get done in the next 5 years. So first, when you look at this, there's relatively few things we can't move back a year, so don't feel pressured in any way to this is more of a plan, and that's what I like to see as a finance guy, as a plan, and it's something that we need to work on going forward. On the $50,000 for Woodlawn right-of-way and utility relocation, we could probably roll that, and really up to you on how much you guys want to spend out of this fund. The two things I would like to see, if you do choose to spend the entire balance of this fund, we'd probably like to run a amendment to get some money into this back into this fund. My biggest concern, and this is a little bit inside stuff, is when you're writing a grant, you really want to say this is our number one priority, and if usually they're funded mainly out of this, and if you have zero money in your fund, that's not really good to write on a grant that this is our number one priority. It's funded through our capital improvement, and also any emergency we could probably take care of with a general fund transfer, but it's always nice to have some money sitting in a non-budgeted fund so we can address it as quick as possible. We don't have to wait even a month to run a budget amendment to get money into a fund to get it spent. So if you guys choose to spend the $750,000, from my presentation, we kind of know we have some reserve that we're going to transfer next year for the 2021. So we'll replenish this fund. But I would just like to, you might see, like you did at the end of last year, kind of a small budget amendment moving some more funds to this to take care of some unanticipated needs or to make sure we can cover some other.
So fellow council member, to see if I'm thinking correctly here. So like stuff like reconstruction of 53rd Oliver to Woodlawn, to me that's like kind of off the table unless we're talking about some sort of serious thing. Because if we're saying we don't want to do the minimum, well, the minimum is all we could afford, and we couldn't afford to do anything else. So, am I correct that we're kind of saying that one's not going to be done? We're not even considering it? Because to consider it, we would have to do nothing this year, essentially, and then try to double it up next year. That would be our only chance to do it. So, are we all in agreement that that one's probably...
I think that is. I said that earlier.
That's how I'm thinking about it too.
It's too big of a chunk in consideration of the other issues.
I recognize how important that one is with future development there, and we're going to have to figure out a way to address that in the near future, but that's probably not this year.
So I'll just throw out an idea here. Excuse me. And we kick this around and reprioritize if you want. But hearing what Ted says about the $766,000, I would be in favor of making Batten the number one priority, do the patch repairs, and do the crack sealing and thermal crack repair on all of it right now. And hold on to and plan to do the slurry and restriping of Webb and Greenwich, right? I keep wanting to say Greenwich. For possibly later in the year. See where we are on these other projects and see what monies are left. Because, I understand you got to get these roads and keep them in good shape or you're going to spend bigger bucks later. And that's just kind of my thinking as I hear the discussion today and when I ran the numbers before. If you took 53rd out of that equation, there's enough money there to do all those projects based on those estimates. But I realize they're estimates, they can change on us.
So. Those were the three that I had written down as well. I actually had the patch repair first, and then Batten second, and then the crack sealing third, but the same three projects.
Okay.
Go ahead, never mind.
And then along those lines, when we look at Batten, I'd like to look at some options. I know you're a big fan of concrete, and I'm not so much. I'm not against it. It's just that I just think it's extra cost for not a lot of benefit. But I would like to ask that we look at, and I know this isn't something that's done traditionally in this part of the country, but when I lived in Los Angeles, I saw this done quite a bit. Concrete base with an asphalt overlay, that 3 inches of asphalt overlay. And maybe that's a less expensive option. I don't know if it is or isn't. But I'd just like to see if that's a less expensive option and maybe address both benefits of concrete and get the benefit of the asphalt overlay that you can burn off and relay when it deteriorates. Because concrete, when it breaks up, you got a big section you got to replace, right?
You can also, I have done asphalt overlays of concrete streets before, so that can be done. You just have to mill out. The milling is a little bit more expensive because the concrete eats up the milling blades more than the asphalt does. My biggest concern about using asphalt on Batten is the lack of storm sewer. That all that water coming down is going to eat away the edges of that asphalt. It's going to eat away at the oils. It's going to eat away at the aggregate that's in there. That's my biggest concern. I'm happy to look at it. I don't know that there's research out there that says specifically how. I live about central in Greenwich in Wichita. My development was put in 15 plus years ago. And in front of it's asphalt streets in front of my house. We've already got 2 inches that's gone of the asphalt along the edges of the curb and gutter. So I hesitate because of that. Brand new subdivisions where you've got a lot of where you've got a lot of storm sewer, it's not as big of a deal. But I'm fairly new subdivision and I still have it. So. That's
you don't have storm sewer in your division?
We do.
Okay.
But we're the entrance to a cul-de-sac, and all the cul-de-sac water is coming down.
Come down there, yeah.
And it doesn't have there's storm sewer right around the corner, but not coming down the cul-de-sac.
Well, and every time we add a new asphalt road, I think we also have to increase our budget for future maintenance on that road for every, 2 to 3 years. We have
About
to go
every 5
apply
years.
the protectant to it,
Yeah, I
which
think-
is somewhat substantial.
I
in
think the
cost.
trade-off is that you spend that money, or you spend the asphalt, but at the end, you spend about the same amount of money on both. I think.
I thought we were seeing that the asphalt and the concrete were pretty close in costs, at least.
Well,
last
sometimes
time
they
we
are,
looked.
and that's one of the things you've
Yeah.
always got to look at is what is the cost today, because it changes.
Right.
I mean, I almost bet is with the oil prices keep going the way they are, you're going to see asphalt just drop in price, but that's a commodity that can change tomorrow the other direction. So.
And I just feel, very similar to Hedgerow, there's a lot of traffic on that street.
Yes, there is.
And in my personal opinion, concrete would be really the only option I would consider. I can certainly look at the concrete base, like a 5-inch concrete base with a 2-inch overlay. But your extra 2 inches of concrete isn't going to be a heck of a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
So, if it's the will of the council to look at that, I can certainly do it. I can start talking with contractors too and kind of getting their ideas, especially on phasing of the project and potential possibilities for servicing the residents and getting them in and out. Because that's pretty big importance.
That's a big deal.
Okay. We've been collecting money on the water bills for stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that money is available to do on the curbing projects? I know we got one culvert, which I assume we'll pay for that out of that budget, but
Yeah, stormwater off the top of my head, I think we're, what I say, we had this conversation, about $175,000. We've been, projected to spend a lot of that on culvert replacement, but I think Ann had a little report on what some of the ideas we had when we given the department presentations. Yes, I think because it's a newer fund, we established it in 2016, I think, and it's of course up to the will of you guys, but I think we're maybe thinking a lot of culverts and very visible water, stormwater improvements instead of just curb and gutter. Unless you guys would like to do something like that, there's just not a lot of money in there. That's the biggest problem is $2 a bill. You think it just doesn't grow that fast. But if that's something you guys want to look at, we can maybe earmark some for this project. Is that what you're thinking?
that's what I'm thinking, since
Yeah.
not necessarily for Batten, but for, we've got a lot of curbs that need repaired. And what was it, 50, 60,000?
35,000.
There you go. Okay, we were going to spend that much money on curb repairs, and if that qualified, then we could take the money out of the budget to pay for that, and we'd still have money left in that budget for other things. And according to the budget, I think you put about 90,000 a year into that,
The stormwater.
into the stormwater fee.
Yeah.
So, that's a third of the stormwater fee would pay for all the curb repairs.
We do have some culverts like Rock Road. We've
What's
got
the major
a
project you
culvert.
talked about?
We talked about that.
There's a wooden box culvert.
There's a wooden box culvert. I think that was like 300, or how much was that?
I don't have it off the top of my head.
And that's something that we have been doing. Again, we've been trying to separate curb and guttering from pavement on our residential, so it wouldn't go against our debt limit if it's on the curb. So it's something we're thinking about with all our phases, just to make sure we're separating what actually is stormwater and what's paving, even though it strengthens a little bit, but it's mainly there for stormwater. So it's a good advice or a good
I didn't get what you said. Just a bit.
Yeah, so we've got, Ann's identified two major projects. One is we've got a wood culvert at north of 53rd on Rock that's got to be replaced. And then there's another one over on 45th, right?
Yep. It's on the north side of 45th near Oliver. It goes those two houses that are kind of pretty far on the west end of Oliver, not quite to the edge. They've got several series of corrugated metal pipes that are going under their driveways right now. One of them has holes in them. If it was a Oliver, if it was one of our arterial streets, that's something that we would have replaced. It serves one house. And so we put a big old metal plate on it, and it's a stopgap measure.
Doesn't
and
make
it's
it look very good.
right, and so that does need to be replaced. And we're looking at the concrete box culverts just to a long span to alleviate some of the hazards that are between, because those are very street. I don't have a cost on those.
I remember the one we did last year was pretty expensive.
I want to say 40 to 70,000. I can't remember.
Yeah, I was thinking 70. So
That went under a major road.
Yeah.
I was thinking when we talked about the culverts, we'd pretty much spent the funds that were in that budget. So I really like that idea, but I think they're kind of already spent on the culverts at this point.
And we do, with our solid waste, if we somehow build a balance on that, we did have a garbage truck, we do transfer any excess and solid waste into this fund to help cover the cost of the main trash trucks going down the roads and tearing up our roads. So you'll see that in 2019. I think we did 100,000, which is a nice little sum for every 3 or 4 years.
So yeah, and I think it's on the last page of Ann's report. So if you would spend, as the mayor suggested, this year, the total of these projects minus 53rd, about 700, a little over 700,000. For 2021, that would eat up your carryover, so you'd have roughly 300,000 to spend for streets.
I think, didn't you say not do the $240,000 one?
No,
I said hold it till later in the year to see where we are.
Yeah, that would need to
But do it.
Yeah.
And maybe only do half of it, web and not
We'd
green
have
edge
another.
this year. That was
I
kind of a question about how
think the
many.
mayor suggested
That's
we
just
revisit
those are just
it is the way to
placeholders.
go.
The 2021.
I think just revisiting it is a good thought.
In a few
based on
months.
Yeah,
Right,
Yeah.
the issue is not falling in, but all these are estimates. And until you get hard quotes and you have hard numbers,
Right.
you don't know where this is gonna go.
400 could be 600.
Or it could be 300.
Or it could be 300.
Yeah, right, and we just don't know. And so it's too big of an unknown, and I don't wanna go and say, oh, well, let's just do it all, and then all of a sudden looking at $1.5 million, and we don't have $1.5 million to spend here, okay? So let's take the pieces in that priority and go after it that way, and then revisit. Maybe in June we can revisit or wonder why time is.
Okay. Well, I agree with your basic three: do the road patching, Oliver work, and Batten. Get an estimate on Batten, and let's see where we go.
And I think, based on like what Ted's saying, if our growth continues and stuff, we may be able to do like what we did this year, add some more to that from our reserve fund, and maybe we'll have another 500,000 to spend next year. Again, knowing that future down the road, we're okay. We're not overspending this year or next year. And if everything continues, we can keep going. And if we have a bad year, we still got plenty of reserves. We're in good shape.
And that's why we need a 30% reserve. I agree with that. I do have concern that we're a lot higher than 30%, but I realize it's a moving target also, so it's not an easy thing for him to come up with that number. He's got to do it every time he gets asked for.
Well, we've got those steps in our debt increase that we've got to account for in the future.
That's what he's done in his
That's what's throwing me
forecast.
quite a bit on
Right.
on certain things. I'll be ready when that levels out pretty hard.
5 more years. Just 5 more years.
Just keep building.
I heard Ty's going to sell $1 million of land.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hey, I remember those days.
I can see it. You can see them in our books. It's eerie. You can really see them just on the spreadsheets, and then. So
When I was on the first time, I'm not even sure you were here yet, or you had just gotten here. I think, maybe. And he certainly wasn't here. But I remember looking at the budget, and there was absolutely no money for what y'all are talking about spending. $0 allocated.
Well, this certainly feels like we're medical doctors and there's like 5 holes in a person. We're deciding which 3 to plug. But
I don't know what else
I
to
could've
do about
brought-
it.
Bagging is the only thing on that list that's dangerous to citizens.
I think our priorities are fine. I wish we had a whole bunch more money to do
I know.
lots of stuff.
Are you comfortable if I bring you, since I do have hard quotes on the patch repair, are you comfortable if I bring that to you at your next meeting?
Yeah.
Oh, the patch repair, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Please.
Bring the others as quickly as you can.
And
I realize it's not an overnight process.
there's one more caveat. If you're looking at my financial report this month, you might see $800,000 in the capital improvement reserve. There's a $100,000 invoice that we're yet to get. So I just don't want there to be inconsistency in my
Well,
reporting
he has to
and for you to
finish,
know that.
he has to finish his work first.
No, yeah. Well, of course, yeah, you have to finish your work,
He's not
but
done.
I don't want you guys to open up my report and said we had another 100,000 that Ted didn't tell us
Right,
about. So
okay.
I just want to be upfront with you. That's why I adjusted for unpaid invoices.
Yeah. Tell him to get his work done, then we'll consider
Yeah.
paying an invoice.
I did offer to pay for the work that's been done, but
Well-
we held off just to help Ted out a little bit.
It's hard to get it back.
One thing that probably won't work either. I asked Ted to figure out if we could take the $400,000 we have instead of giving. It's. I explained this before, so hopefully you understood the last time. You take the $400,000, you take that cash, and you pay off land debt with it. Then you get a new loan and put that debt not in the land bank debt, but in the city debt, and you take it out as a lower interest rate. So the amount of debt stays the same. You're just moving debt from the land bank to the city, and the reason you move from the land bank to the city is because you get a lower interest rate. The trouble is whether that's going to really make us any money is it might not make us any money because 400,000 isn't that much money. If we were doing $1 million, it would definitely make us money. It may not be enough money. We may not have enough interest left on the debt for that small money to make it matter. And there's some fees that go along with borrowing and whatnot. But Ted said he'd look into it for me. If we're going to make, $20, we're not going to do it. If we're going to make $50,000 on interest, then I would say, then we should at least talk about it, and it might be worth doing all that rigmarole, if that makes sense. But
I thought
other
about
concern-
something like that, but I don't think that's a good idea. We can't borrow money against the land again because we don't have enough land.
you're not borrowing money.
No, just hold on, let me finish. So we're moving debt from land to general obligation. We don't have a limit on the general obligation. So if we move debt from land to general obligation, we're cutting into how much money we can borrow for road improvements and other things. So we need to keep the land debt and pay everything else off first.
The general, like 1.5 away from the cap or something like that?
Yeah, well, it's probably more than that right now.
So I don't think moving, I don't think we're planning on borrowing anywhere near that much money. So
Well, we're looking at $1 million for Woodlawn, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we may have to borrow $1 million for the park as well. If we sell more land in that area, we'll be
Well, and then like Bristol Hollows and these new subdivisions, all of the land, even though those are special assessed, all of the road debt goes against our.
So we're that close to capping out our city debt.
So the tough thing is it's a dollar for dollar. So like, say it's $2 million.
Yeah.
So we go borrow 400,000. There's 400,000 that drops it. So yeah, I mean, we could, and it does grow. So as our assessed valuation goes up, then we have more that we can borrow. Now, like stormwater, curb and guttering, which what Ted was mentioning, we try to pull out. Water,
Utilities,
sewer, all of that is not. That doesn't count. So, phase 1 of Rock Spring is $2 million. Of that, $1 million is the street. So we pull out the curb and guttering, storm sewer, so the actual asphalt may be $500,000. So that's why we do that. So it's only $500,000 goes towards our debt. Now you get $2 million in new houses built. So now all of a sudden we're growing back that. But yeah, that is a big concern. Is something like that counts against our debt limit, which in the end could mean that a developer comes in and says, "Well, I want to build a new housing development." We say, "Well, we don't have the authority to borrow the money for the streets for you."
But we do look at every opportunity to refinance when we can. And now general obligation bonds can't really refinance anymore with the new tax law. But especially our land debt, so a lot of our revenue bonds we always refinance when it's worth it. So hopefully we get more of those. We did one last year, saved I think 90,000 I think in total, which is like 10,000 a year, which that works. But so we'll continue to look for ways, and I appreciate the call and the we did run some numbers together, and like you said, if it's feasible, we'll go after it. But if it's not,
I still want to know the number, because then every year that went by, the money you save on it, you can put towards the 400,000. That 400,000 becomes zero if you're making enough money.
My biggest concern with that is because it is a taxable revenue bond on the land, you're converting a taxable revenue bond to a non-taxable general obligation. I'm thinking the IRS might say something to us. They might not, but that would be my biggest, when you ask, that would be my biggest concern. However, they might just say, hey, pay us more money. So that might be their resolution, but that would be it.
Okay, so any other discussion this evening? God, I'm going to say we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your input and participation. Citizens for coming. We really appreciate the input, and we do value it. Okay?
Thank you for these very thorough reports.
Yes, very good.
You're here for Baton as well? Yeah.